The Nature Photo Guys podcast is brought to you by our friends at the Camera Store, located in Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
It's our go-to spot for everything photography and video. Whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned pro, the Camera Store has what you need.
And the best part, they ship right across Canada with free shipping on most orders over $99.
The Camera Store is a legendary name in photography, so make sure to check them out today at camerastore.com.
Welcome to the Nature Photo Guys podcast,
where we talk about nature photography, from gear to our philosophies and everything in between.
So grab a cup of coffee, sit back and relax.
You're listening to Joe Desjardins
and Chris Gibbs, the Nature Photo Guys.
Hey guys, welcome to the Nature Photo Guys podcast.
We are very excited to welcome our next guest. But before we begin, we want to thank our sponsor of today's episode, Sony Canada, in partnership with the Camera Store.
Sony hugely supports Canadian creators, including photographers, filmmakers, and everything in between. We appreciate their support for community and sponsoring this episode.
They also have some great promos, including the Sony Trade-In Trade-Up program. You can get a bonus credit from Sony on trade-ins to the Camera Store toward new Sony mirrorless cameras and lenses, up to $500 on select models. You can check out all of the details at thecamerastore.com.
So this is a great time to do it if you're in the market for a new Sony camera or lens. This offer runs until March 31st, 2025 and is stackable with any other existing Sony rebate at the Camera Store.
Now, let's jump into the conversation with our next guest, a photographer and author based on Vancouver Island, Canada. With 40 years behind the camera, he's captured breathtaking moments, from swimming with humpback whales in Tonga to photographing the elusive spirit bear in Canada's Great Bear Rainforest. His travels have spanned 7 continents and 58 countries, but he prefers to immerse himself deeply in the places he visits. A former humanitarian photographer turned celebrated author, educator, and speaker, his passion lies in turning his lens toward the natural world and inspiring others to pursue a life of intention and creativity. After a life-altering accident redefined his creative journey, he has encouraged countless photographers to move beyond the rules and create images that are not only visually compelling, but deeply personal. Known for his mantra, "Gear is good, vision is better," he brings a refreshing perspective to the craft of photography. Along the way, he has also authored several books, and will dive into his latest work, Light, Space, and Time, Essays on Camera Craft and Creativity, and explore how his vision continues to evolve. Please welcome to the show, David duChemin.
Hey guys.
Hey David, how are you?
Welcome.
I'm so good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we are super excited to have you on. We got, 40, 50 questions to ask you. So I hope you have time.
Yeah, I booked you off till like next Sunday, so we're good.
Oh, perfect.
Well, I'm telling you, after the deep dive we did, it's going to be a 3-part series, I'm sure. No, super excited to have you on, David. And just like we start with every podcast, we'd love to hear a little bit, about you, how you got started. I know you've had, talk about your early career and maybe how you segued into photography or what initially drew you to photography. And just kind of take it from there.
So you're saying give us part 1. We're going to do part 1 today.
Yeah, sure, exactly.
So I'll make it fairly short. I started as a photographer right when I was a kid. My dad was he was a tank commander with the Canadian Army, and also did photography for the Army. And I, to be honest, not really sure. I just know he always had a camera around. So I come by that kind of honestly. And by the time I was like 14, I kind of figured out that I wasn't really good at a lot of other stuff. My peers were all into athletics and I was crap at athletics, and they were into music and I was crap at that. But I could draw and I could do some of the creative stuff. And I bought a rangefinder camera at a neighbor's garage sale, and it just immediately clicked. Something, maybe it was just, the fascination with it, but I started spending all my spare money on crappy no-name film from the superstore, and it made sense to me, and I would take my camera out and try to figure it out. And I loved looking at the world through the lens. And, I always spent a lot of time in the outdoors. I grew up in a canoe in Algonquin Park. And so it was just a natural, suddenly I was taking my camera wherever I went. And eventually I transitioned into like a Pentax Spotmatic. It was like 20 plus years old before I even got a hold of it. But I finally had interchangeable lenses, and there was just something about it. But as much as I loved photography, I kind of felt like if I did it professionally, and I went and I spent time with a photographer. I grew up mostly in Ottawa, so I went downtown Ottawa. This photographer, very well known there, and I spent a week, as a job shadow kind of thing, and I did no photography. It was all sweeping the darkroom and filing negatives and wrapping cables, and that was cool, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And I realized being a professional photographer would be a lot. It would be a lot of not photography going on. Mm-hmm. So I completely zagged. I followed a girlfriend out to the cold Canadian prairies and spent like 5 years at a theology school and graduated from there to I'm sure the pride of my alma mater. I went into comedy, and I spent 12 years doing comedy. And all of that time I was doing photography, but I was doing it as a hobbyist. I was just doing it because I loved it. I should say just doing it because I loved it. I mean, that's the best reason to do it. But there was no occupational intention. And then one day I went to Haiti, and I went there as a comedian. And it's a bit of a long, drawn out story I won't bore you with, but they asked me if I would bring my cameras. And I started shooting. And like almost from the moment I got there, I was like, this is what I finally figured out. I'd been learning to use this storytelling instrument for so long, but I had no idea what I wanted to tell stories about. And I went home after 2 weeks in Haiti, and I said, I figured it out. I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to be a humanitarian photographer. And everyone in my circle of my friends, my family, they're like, what's that? I said, I have no idea, but I'm going to find out. And nice. They're like, can you even make a living at that? I'm like, again, I have no idea, but we're going to find out. Yeah, I figured, as a comic, I did magic and juggling. And I was like, if I can sell juggling for 12 years, I can figure this out. And so that started a career in humanitarian photography, working for NGOs and humanitarian organizations, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. And then eventually that kind of transitioned because I was already in places like East Africa, like Kenya. Suddenly I found myself leading safaris, and I was doing more and more wildlife photography. And I think COVID broke me in terms of my desire to be with other human beings. And I'm pretty much, I woke up one day, like sort of right at the end of COVID. And I'm like, I think I'm a wildlife photographer now. Like it had been sort of a thing that I was doing, seriously, but not like, I wouldn't have described myself that way. And suddenly I was like, yeah, I think like I need gear that will work as a wildlife photographer. I need to rearrange my travel and suddenly that was what I was doing. And I make my living mostly as an educator, mostly teaching and speaking. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. I was former comedian turned humanitarian photographer turned I would rather spend time with bears guy.
Well, it's funny you say that because Chris and I were talking about that earlier. Yeah. I don't know if it was earlier today or yesterday about when exactly you turned into a wildlife photographer, because even just looking at your bio, it's all animal kind of related, like where you want to be, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And I remember you back in the day as more of a, you say humanitarian, but more of a travel photographer, mm-hmm. people photographer, sure. Yeah. And all this kind of stuff. And then looking at your bio, it's all wildlife now. And I'm like, so I guess you just answered the question that we had about when that actually happened. When did you start transitioning away from that into primarily doing wildlife? Because right now, I know you're headed shortly to Kenya again. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And I'm assuming for, to photograph wildlife and
100%.
I'm not sure if you're, doing tours or anything like that, mm-hmm. but, do you miss that, the humanitarian side, like the people side, like when you're going to Kenya now, is it just strictly going to be wildlife, or if that opportunity comes up, are you going to,
I have very close relationships in northern Kenya. If an opportunity came up, if a previous client said, "Hey, would you shoot for us again?" I would absolutely entertain it. There are very select few opportunities like that I think I would entertain. To be honest, it's just all about the wildlife for me now. And that may change, but I think you have to listen to yourself. You have to know yourself. And when you wake up and there is no desire to go back to India, go back to all the places that you once loved, I think you have to listen to that. I don't think there's any point in sort of trying to cram a square peg into a round hole. And I woke up one day and went, I guess I'm a square peg now, and I got to change what I'm doing. It really was. I woke up one day and kind of went, like everyone else knew that my work had already changed. I wasn't photographing people. And I realized that the gear I was shooting all on Fujifilm at the time, which I loved shooting on Fujifilm for what I was doing at the time: street stuff, travel stuff, cultural. It was the perfect kit. It was nice and small and did everything I needed and nothing I didn't. And I woke up and went, yeah, this isn't working anymore. So, when you have to change your entire system, it's a bit of like, nothing's going to convince you or open your eyes to your new reality more than having to drop a lot of money on new gear. And I just went, well, I guess that's what I do now. It wasn't really a conscious decision. It was an evolution that I was probably the last one to know.
Really? Wow.
Okay.
So what drew you to Sony then? Was there a reason for that?
We could go real deep on this. No, we couldn't. My best friend had Sony gear, and I picked it up and I was playing with it, and I remember saying, because I was missing shots left, right, and center. The Fuji at the time not only did it not have the availability of longer lenses, the faster stuff that we need as wildlife photographers. But I was just, smaller sensors, and I was just increasingly like, this is not. It was a great tool for what I was doing, but not for what I was becoming. And so I picked up his stuff, and I said to him, like, so if I were going to go to Sony, what should I get? He's like, well, this is what I chose, so that's all I can recommend. And I went, okay, cool, I'll get that. And he was doing some upgrades on his system, and I got it. He was very generous and sold me his stuff at a pretty good price. So honestly, I have shot with every system. I have shot with Canon, Nikon, Leica, Pentax. I've shot with everything over 40 years. But I probably would, if this had not been so easy, I probably would have gone back to Nikon because the ergonomics were always so comfortable for me. I think, in my heart, I'm kind of a Nikon guy.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'll, until the day Sony decides to sponsor me and send me gear, I'll be like the Sony photographer who's really kind of a Nikon. But at the end of the day, I'm so brand agnostic, guys. Like, honestly, no one's going to look at my work and go, that was his Fuji period. Like, come on, we obsess so much about the gear that at a certain point, it's like, pick the tool that works for you. Pick the one that, and for me at the time, it was like, I could get all of this gear for a much better price. And it just made sense. It didn't make sense for me to go, well, okay, but let me compare with Nikon, because no one was offering to give me Nikon gear. So it was, for sure. And my buddy John, he knows his stuff. Like, he really, so I kind of went, like, he is a nerd through and through. And I will say that to his face. I love the guy. And I just trust his nerd judgment way more than my own. So I kind of went, if it's good enough for him, right, it's certainly good enough for me. So, yeah.
Which lenses are your favorite then on the wildlife side? Depending, doesn't matter the brand, I guess, but which lens are you drawn to for the wildlife?
Okay. So this is really counterintuitive, but if I could only shoot with one lens, and the circumstances would adapt themselves to me, I would shoot with a 16-35 for the rest of my life. I love it. It forces you to get in close. It forces a perspective that is intimate and inclusive. It feels like you're there. And that's what I want my work to feel like. I want people to go, oh my God, I feel like I'm there. You can do that with a 300. You can do it with a 600. There are ways of bringing depth into your photograph with that. With those lenses. But if I couldn't, I am crazy. This sounds so, I can't believe I'm going to say this because I'm the gear is good, vision is better guy. But I am right now, I'm obsessed with my 300 2.8. It's, I used to, when I was shooting Canon, when I was shooting Nikon, for both systems, I had a 300 2.8 for my DSLRs, and they were big and they were heavy. And I recently got this Sony 300 2.8 that is not much heavier than like my old 70 to 200. I can handhold it all day long. It's sharp as a tack. It's fast. And it takes a 2X, so suddenly instead of carrying like I would have said 600 4.0 was my favorite before because but it's so heavy. It's so big.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
And if that lens, if the 300 2.8 had been available to me when I got the 600, I probably would have had a tough decision. I probably would have ended up with the 300 2.8 because again, you can put a 2X on. The only disadvantage is I can't go any further than that. Whereas the 600, you could put a 2X on if you really wanted to.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But increasingly, I want a little more space in my images. I want a little more negative space. I want a little more scale. And so pulling out a little isn't the worst thing in the world. So that's my, if I couldn't, like 16 to 35 is great if you're going to use remotes. And I use remotes for some of my work. But what I want is I want a nice fast lens that's going to give me some control over that cluttered. One of our biggest struggles is that cluttered background. Like you can't,
exactly.
It's like if I could just go prune some branches, right?
Yeah.
So the faster lenses. Having said that, the 100 to 400 that's in my bag it's so versatile. It's a little slower, but it's a gorgeous lens, and it gives me a good amount of. But again, I'd rather have a 70 to 200 2.8 that I could put a doubler on,
sure,
and I have more options.
Gives you the flexibility. Yeah, exactly.
You betcha.
But my thinking has changed a lot over the years. As lenses get faster, as they get lighter, I love shooting primes, but a zoom, I like to get it right in the camera, and a zoom allows me to kind of tweak that composition, pull it out a little and get a little closer. So it's always this wrestling match with your gear, right? Like you pick the best tool for the job, but there's always that, if only I had at some point you got to shut up and make the photograph.
If only I had another 20 grand is what they always say.
Carry more. Yeah.
But in a way, it's not even it is the 20 grand, but it's also the fact that you get onto small safari planes and just traveling internationally. It's like I can only carry so much in my hand luggage. You got to make choices. Like you can't bring everything, even if you already own it. And I own a lot of gear. Yeah. It's like, I don't have room for 7 lenses. I have room for 3 lenses.
Sure.
Which ones are they going to be? And I always tell my clients, because I do, I bring clients to Kenya. We'll shoot the first 2 weeks with clients, and then the second we'll just do on our own. But I always tell them, look, no matter what you bring, there's always, if you bring a 600, you're going to want an 800. If you bring, an 800, you're going to want a 24 millimeter. Like you're always fighting that, you're in the real world with certain constraints. It's like, well, you don't have it. So stop your whining and figure out a composition that's going to work for you with what you have. Otherwise, we're just going to always spend our time being these discontent photographers looking to the next piece of gear as though that's the solution for our crappy compositions. At a certain point, you got to shut up, be in the moment, use what you have, and make it work.
That's some great advice. Absolutely.
I'm
a little curious about your camera traps. So you obviously do that down or when you go to Kenya and that sort of thing. You're
Kenya,
carrying,
and I've been doing it with grizzlies the last couple of years as well. It's pretty simple. I started with, I had a guide in Kenya that had like a cage made out of metal and like, it was almost like welded with rebar and stuff. And he bolted his camera on to the inside and then used his phone to trigger it with an app. And I was really intrigued by that. And I went home and I built one out of aluminum that was a little lighter, a little easier to travel with. Used the I don't know, even what was Shutter or something. It was just a third-party app. And And that was okay. It worked all right, but I realized a couple things. One, the animals weren't going to, for them, they so far haven't screwed with my camera, so I don't need a cage. A cage is, it's a little harder to get level, and so I've gone now to a small, really small, really right stuff tripod, and I'm using. What's it called? Cam Ranger 2 is the piece that I'm using to kind of connect it. And now I was shooting with an iPhone, but an iPad has a bigger antenna, so it'll give you a little bit of more range.
Oh, okay.
And that's what I shoot with now, and it's working great. I did kind of cave in. I bought my two main cameras are Sony A1s. So until the recent Mark IIs came out, it was kind of their flagship, and they're pretty pricey. So I think I'm pretty cavalier about my gear, but I would feel like I'd probably cry if a bear knocked my A1 into the water. So I went and bought like a used, I don't know, Sony's, my ability to remember their model numbers, like it's an A7R4 or something. I don't know.
Okay.
But it was a little bit cheaper. It's still a full frame. It's not quite as fast, but I at least that way, if something decides to stomp on, like the rhinos that I photographed, they're more scared of it than anything. They get a little too close and then they're backing up.
Oh, seriously? Oh, yeah. That's awesome.
But at some point, something's going to, grab that camera and wander off into the bush. Like I'm convinced I'm going to lose it to a leopard or a curious grizzly or something. But so far, and it's still what I like about it, because it's camera trapping's a little different. That's, you put it out, it's automatic. This, I'm just 50 meters away, and I'm in the moment, and I can see the bear like right, wide angle lens, and the bear's like right there. And so there's still this sense of moment. There's still the need to, choose your compositions and press the button, and you can control everything from the iPad on this thing, and it's brilliant. So change your aperture, your EV comp, all that stuff. But there's still a feeling of really being there, which I don't think I'd be that interested in camera traps per se. I've seen some gorgeous photographs come out of them, but I'm in this for the encounter. Like I want to feel like I'm there. So, but anyway, it's allowing me to get photographs I couldn't otherwise. For my own safety and for the bears and stuff, there are very real limits to what we can, how close we can get, and there should be, so
absolutely.
So that's and the only thing I have found is that I have to be very vigilant about when I post this stuff about telling people, no, I'm not sitting on a beach with a 16 millimeter lens, wrapped in salmon guts, waiting for the bear to show up. And I often forget, and I have to go back and go, well, to be clear, because I think people have this idea of photographers have been doing this for a while, and they're like, oh my gosh, how close was he? And I don't want to glamorize the oh my gosh, he was a big bear and look how brave I am.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because that's not the story. The bear is not, generally speaking, they are to be respected, but not feared, I think. Mm-hmm. And so to be a safe distance away and have that encounter, I think it's probably important that people understand that that's how we're doing our work, not taking stupid risks and endangering, the bears. And because soon it's going to be everyone out there on a beach wrapping themselves in salmon. And that's going to be very bad. That's going to end very poorly for the bears.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We get all those questions all the time too.
Yeah. Right. How close?
Oh yeah, how close you are. Yeah. They don't understand. So you got to educate them.
And I think
for sure
that's an opportunity for education where you can tell people like, that's not the narrative.
That's right.
Because I think there is a lot of chest pounding in wildlife photography. I see it on Instagram all the time. There's a lot of the, look at me, how, look how big my lens is, look how close I got. And, and it's almost what we're doing when we say, look how brave I am, is we're quietly, we're not outright saying it, but we're kind of villainizing the animals. We're saying, like, look how close I am. I need to be courageous because the shark, the cat, whatever, the bear. And it's like, that's not the narrative we should be buying into or promoting. So I do think those kind of conversations are important.
Exactly. Oh, absolutely. So with your storytelling, David, do you shoot a lot of video too? Or are you just primarily still?
None.
No interest, eh?
No, part of me thinks I should. I feel this kind of almost like this obligation. but I get very suspicious every time I feel that obligation. I'm like, here's another thing that it's going to distract me and take my attention away from what I know I'm good at. And I do know this. I know that video is another language. It's hard. It's resource intensive. And if I'm shooting video, I'm really not paying attention to stills.
Sure.
And I'm not a videographer. I would rather leave filmmaking to filmmakers and respect them for the acquired skill and do what I do. But having said that, there are people that are making video, and I'd love to, because I know that as soon as the light gets low, it's like, well, I could actually be squeaking out some video here.
Yeah, exactly.
I just the time to learn it all. I've already got like terabytes of hard drives I'm trying to clear off to get more space, because it is. I mean, how much we would spend on hard drives if we just kept. I come back from Kenya, from a month in Kenya, with at least 30,000 photographs. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of raw files, to store. And then if I was shooting video, I can't even imagine. So I don't know. You got to make choices.
Joe and I just came back from Churchill back in November, and I had 3.5 terabytes of content between photos and video. So you're right. It definitely
and a lot
adds
of that
up.
was video. So the video stuff certainly adds up for sure.
Yeah. Definitely.
But having said that, if you're, there is such power to video that if you're inclined to, video actually got me back into still photography. There were a couple of years there where I was kind of like, I don't know, I was distracted by things. And I had a buddy who did a lot of video, and this was back, I don't know, it was probably 20 years ago, but I'm like, I'm going to do my Final Cut Pro, certification. I'm going to really get into, and I got about like 12 hours into this course. And I was just like, this is not for me. Because how much you really have to be good at with not just the art of editing, but audio and, oh my God, I just, no, thank you.
Yeah, it makes you choose, right? It makes you choose between photo or video. What am I going to shoot, right? And Joe and I talk about that all the time. It's it definitely makes you make a decision what you want. And sometimes you're frustrated that I wish I would have had a photo, or I wish I would have got that behavior on video, and definitely makes you think for sure. So
I use my iPhone for video. If I need anything, it's going to be like this, and hopefully, but it never translates. It's just, I like it for my own memory.
Yeah.
If I'm going to share stuff, for the most part, it's going to be, a well-edited photograph that's ready for the world to see it.
There you go.
My video skills are, you don't want to see the crap that I'm shooting.
Well, I think once you consider video seriously, making that decision to go either with photo or video, I think the best way to do it is actually to purchase a cinema camera. And then that way you've got, a clear vision of, okay, I'm either going to go, I'm strictly doing video today, or I'm going to do stills. But right now, Chris and I are carrying two camera bodies, one set up for video, one set up for stills. This lens for that. This one's got the NDs, and oh my God. And then you're carrying two systems.
Right?
Yeah, you're carrying both systems. And then it's just like, I should have had an extra 10, 15 seconds of video on that before I went to
take a photo.
I mean, I guess you're not missing anything, David. Like the mind games and what you need and stuff, because it's wildlife, so you're trying to capture that behavior. And when we were in Churchill, to be able to capture that video of the bear sparring and then 120 frames per second, it was that was super cool, right?
Yeah,
very cool. Yeah. But I was like, oh crap, I'm missing those images too, because I want that. So you're switching back and forth, and then you might have missed that decisive moment there, and that's so. Yeah, I think you're wise sticking to photos for now until video certainly piques your interest, because it sounds to me when something piques your interest, you kind of dive head first and
100%.
Kind of learn it all, right?
All of my photography, all of my creative endeavors are driven by my curiosity. If I'm interested in something, then I go at it 100%. And the flip side is, if I'm not interested, I'm totally good with just going, it's not for me. And I can still appreciate that others are doing it and go, oh my God, that's amazing what they're doing. But I think as you grow as a creative person, you realize there's a lot of power in saying no. It's like, I don't want to say no to anything. And I'm like, yeah, but you are saying no to to giving your full attention to other things when your attention is so diluted. So people that
Sure, yeah.
it's like, oh, I'm afraid of missing out. I'm like, you're already missing out. Like that's just that you will always. So the question is, can we choose what we miss out on? And I'm pretty good at kind of going, I'd rather be good at this than just mediocre at a bunch of this. So I don't even print my own work anymore. Printing is the amount of time I think that you need to dedicate to become a very good printer. It's a craft all its own. Certainly it's more technical than I want to be involved in. And so I'm a bulldog about getting your work printed, having your work printed. I used to say, you got to print your damn work. Now I'm like, well, if you're not doing it, get someone to do it. And I would rather have someone who can really print my work well than for me to just kind of be a bit of a dilettante with it, fuss around, and then just print okay. Guess it depends what you want. And some people are like, yeah, but I love printing. Great. I really don't. Like the fighting with my printer, clogged heads. And every time I sit down for a print, or used to sit down to do a print job, it's like, frig, I got to spend another couple $100 on ink and paper. And I've ran out. It was just finally, I was just like, someone else can do it.
Well, it's good you can recognize that, and then be able to focus, like you said, on what you're passionate about as well.
You can't do everything,
You're right.
You when you're on safari, you can either sit there and photograph the lilac-breasted roller or the little African brown bird, whatever, or you can go photograph the leopard. But you can't generally do both. And it's like, I got to make a choice. Yeah, so knowing what you're most excited about. I mean, maybe the roller is sitting in the most incredible light, and it's like, the leopard can wait. This is unbelievable. But you still got to be able to make a choice. You still have to be able to say, I can do one thing and one thing only. I can shoot with this lens, I can't shoot with two lenses at the same time. I can't, So I think there's a self-awareness that's really important for photographers, because if your attention is too diluted, I just don't think life is long enough, and our wallets certainly aren't deep enough.
Yeah,
very true,
to do it all.
Hey everyone, our Wonders of Waterton Nature Photography and Video Workshop is happening June 5th to 8th.
Don't miss this chance to learn and create in one of Canada's most beautiful parks. Spots are limited. Register now at thenaturephotoguys.ca.
Your socials, so you're talking about focusing immensely on certain things. When we took a deep dive, you had a podcast, right? A beautiful Anarchy. You have a YouTube channel, Craft and Vision. You've authored 32 books. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's something like that. Half of them are digital, ebooks that I publish myself, and then half of them are actual, honest to God, print on ink on paper.
For sure. So, can you tell us a little bit about the podcast and the YouTube channel, and why you decided to go? Why did you decide to pursue that? Like, is it just to get the message out, or
When I came back to photography, I knew that at the time that I wanted to do two things. I wanted to do humanitarian photography, and I wanted to teach, because teaching's always been important to me. Teaching was not initially so much an occupation, like I want to make my living from this. It was a feeling of calling, like I have always wanted and loved to teach. So those outlets have been really helpful to me. But they're actually a very good example of my attention, because I didn't do the YouTube channel at the same time as I did my podcast. If you look carefully, I haven't posted anything to that YouTube channel for a long time.
Yeah. We got the dates.
Yeah. So I did that for a while, and I learned a bunch of stuff, and I felt like I got to the end, and I'm actually thinking about reviving it. I'm just sort of scratching my head over what the format's going to be. And, but I did it for a while, and I loved it. And then started doing other things, and I built a course, and while I was building the course, I didn't have time for the YouTube show. And eventually, like the pandemic happened, and I thought, what if I did a podcast, like just a spoken word thing? And that became the Beautiful Anarchy podcast, which again, I haven't done for quite a while. It kind of stalled out around the same area, like 85 episodes. I think 85 is like the point at which I just kind of lose attention and go somewhere else. I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah, for sure.
But books have remained, like books have been a constant,
Yeah.
But the teaching is really important to me. And so being on social, I even quit social for a while. I think I was off all social networks for like 3 years. I mean, we could talk all day long about what I don't like about social.
I'd love to hear that.
Well, everything.
No, the reason why is because I have it down here, and we always like to hear the perspective of, our guests on social media, because, we love it. We hate it. We
feel forced to do it sometimes.
Absolutely. Chris and I feel like we're put in a position where we have to create reels, videos, to grow, to gain reach and everything else. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on social media as it is now, and maybe how it was. I guess you said you stopped for about 3 years.
Yeah. And I have strong objections to everything Mark Zuckerberg seems to put his hand to. There's a lot of sort of moral dilemmas that I'm faced with every day for being involved with, putting my work on there. It is, how do I say this generously? It is an imperfect tool. And the reason I came back to it is because what it is good at, or certainly better than anything else, are these micro connections, my ability to reach out to people like you guys. I mean, our connection came through Insta, and I saw your stuff and thought I should reach out, and I reached out via Insta. It allows us to do these little points of connection, which can sometimes go in really wonderful directions. And I have people that read my books that are going to look for me and want to say, hey, I read your book. It was really great. They're not going to write a whole long email, which is great, because if they do, I need to write a whole long email in reply. And,
sure.
and it's so, which I do. I get a lot of email.
That's good. Yeah.
But to have a little micro connection, that's great. But I do not fool myself into thinking that the number of my followers means anything. How many of them are bots? I haven't the foggiest idea. How often people are actually seeing my stuff is so out of my control, and there's no correlation between how good it is and how many likes I get. And so I think there's a lot of danger for creatives that look at this as though it actually means something, and it doesn't. It's like shaking the magic 8 ball and going, well, that's what it means. No, it doesn't. And I worry, I mean, there's a lot in this new book. If it's true, and I truly believe it is, that our greatest challenges are not technical, but creative, then how we think about the camera is important. How we think about our work, how we think about ourselves, all of that's important. And when we compare ourselves to others, even sort of by sitting there on Insta and going, oh man, that's an amazing photograph. I haven't made anything like that. And, and then look at all the likes they get. It's very easy to end up wasting an hour of your time. Suddenly you're like, whoa, why did I even pick this phone up?
Oh yes.
And not only to have lost an hour of time, but to have lost it to something that's kind of, if not toxic to us, is certainly not helping us. So I consider Insta a tool that I use. I try to use very carefully. I'm like anyone else. I'll go for the dopamine hit any day, but I try to be very mindful of the fact that this is not real life. The connections, however, can be real, and that's why I'm back on. I say on social, but I'm not. I'm Insta only. That's all I am interested in. I said to my wife yesterday, I said, wouldn't it be great if there was a social app just for photographers? And I was like, but that's what Insta was supposed to be. It's always going to be this, race to the bottom. And so I don't know. I don't know. It's one of those things that I have a reluctant. It's not even reluctant. I have a love-hate relationship with it. It does give me an opportunity to connect with an audience. The connections themselves are real, but the stats behind them, I don't even bother. I'm like, it doesn't. It's like I said this the other day to someone. It's like you're measuring like you're measuring the distance your car drives with the thermometer. It's the wrong unit of measure. It's the wrong tool to measure. They have no correlation. We're constantly looking at it going, but it's 80 degrees. It's like, okay, but that's not the thing that tells me about the thing,
Sure. Yeah.
So I think we have to be careful with it. I think it would be a mistake for us to believe that it reflects real life at all. But again, also a mistake to discard it entirely if what you want is that connection. Because for me as a teacher, I need that connection. I thrive on it. And I like the people that I teach. I don't generally like people, in general, but I like my people, and so I want to remain connected to them. And I feel like it's a way to do that.
Free marketing as well, right?
Well, sort of, sort of. I don't use Insta for it's not even, I would have in the past said I just use it for organic reach, but if anyone that relies on Insta for organic reach now is like, you clearly don't understand how this works.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, we lost that years ago. Yeah.
Especially
more recently. Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I worry too about, especially my daughter and her friends and, they're basing their careers or their, what is it? My daughter's a cosplayer and she's, she had a big account and somebody hacked it and she had to start over and oh my God, she was in tears and everything based on her following. And I mean, she was young. I mean, that was, I don't know, she's probably early 20s, 2021. And it was important to her, but it just goes to show you the effects of social media and the fact that, followers were, a huge important metric to her when it actually didn't really matter because now she's got like 1,700 or something fairly small, but the interaction she's got with those 1,700 far outweighs what she had before. Because like you said, you're not sure if they're bots or whatever it is, but she's getting real world, like real interactions with these people. Because when she had to start over, it was her friends, it was acquaintances, it was, you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, you really can't base, okay, you got 100,000 followers, but if you're not making those connections, if you're not, how do you say that? You can kind of tell too with, looking at somebody's photo and seeing the interactions. Like, I mean, there's people with really small accounts that have, 50, 100, 200 comments and those are legitimate people. Those are legitimate followers that actually care and that you want to interact with and everything else. So, the idea of social media right now and, that metrics of like, you need hundreds of thousands of followers. So you got to, Chris and I are guilty of this, trying to grow our following by doing what Instagram says, you know what I mean?
Now it's a video sharing tool, right?
Well, it is. And, honestly, it's tiring. And I've been balking video for years and years and years. And I'm starting to get into a little bit. I actually enjoy shooting video. The editing part, not so much. I'm learning, but it was almost like I was forced into it. And I didn't like that as far as
the real side for sure.
Right? Yeah. The real side for sure. So I appreciate you saying that, like, just be true to yourself. Do you, don't worry about, I guess what the algorithm is saying, like, because you weren't worried about learning video, creating reels, editing and all this kind of stuff. You stayed true to yourself. You're using photos to tell stories, reaching your audience that way. But why did you quit for 3 years? Like, did you just have enough?
I was just done.
Just tired of it?
Done. I was tired of staring at my phone all the time. I was tired of the pressure.
Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah.
And so when I came back, I had a long sort of heart to heart with myself and said, like, why are you coming back? And how can you do this without it being such a time suck, without you feeling, and it really, I just had to be really honest with myself and go, okay, this is what this tool is, why I'm picking this particular tool up. And, and it has been good to reconnect in ways again, with my audience, that because not everyone's going to come on safari with me. Not everyone's going to have an opportunity to meet me in person. And those connections are very important to me as a teacher and as, someone who truly genuinely cares about, these people. So, but again, sometimes you have to put your your oxygen mask on first. And if the tool isn't working for you, if you realize, gosh, this is like, there's a whole other, I have so many criticisms of social media. I don't think it's good for our attention span. I don't think it's good for us cognitively. I think it's very hostile to photographs themselves, because this is how we're experiencing photographs. Like
Right.
and we only stop when it's super saturated and super big in the frame, and there's no nuance. And so is that how we're going to start photographing? And do we photograph for the gram? I mean, it's just nauseating how similar some of these accounts look to each other. The styles, half of them look like they've all been run through the same presets.
Exactly.
And I just, as someone who wants to encourage people to be themselves, I'm constantly, my life goal is that you make photographs that are not only good, but that are truly your own. And I don't think there are people that are doing that on Insta. There are some incredible people on Insta. I think they get a little bit drowned out. But if Instagram and posting to Instagram and all of that is affecting your creative life and making you a less individual creator, I think it's the wrong tool for you. I think you can find you can still be found on the internet. There are other social options. There is still a way to create. Like, I still have a blog. In fact, I think one of the biggest things, and you mentioned it, was with your daughter, Joe, that she had this great big following. Does anyone remember Google Plus? Like, there were photographers out there with millions of followers, and suddenly it evaporated. And let's be very honest. Meta is like one terms of service update away from losing a lot of people. Just one thing could topple the whole apple cart. And then all of these people have these massive millions of Instagram followers. They've built their house on someone else's property. Suddenly the whole thing goes up in smoke. Where's your audience? My audience is primarily by email. I reach out to my audience every 2 weeks with an article about the art and craft of photography. And that's how I connect with them. And Insta can go to hell for all I care. I mean, on some level, I really hope it doesn't, because I love those connections.
Yeah.
But if and when it happens, the sand will not get, like the foundation of my house won't get swept away, because I own my connection to my audience. And that's what I worry about for photographers that are building an audience on Insta, even a very legitimate audience that they're enjoying. And let's say it's all kittens and rainbows. You could lose it all. There is one thing, one legislation, and suddenly a chunk of your audience or all of your audience goes away. So I don't know if I've answered the question. I can't I've lost track of what so far down the rabbit hole. I can't remember what the question was.
That's amazing advice. It's amazing advice to new photographers starting on their own, or starting their own business, or starting, moving forward in their career, for sure. That's great.
Get them on email. Absolutely. Get them on email.
Well, you made a really good point. As of right now, I read today, it was supposed to have happened January 9th, but it went to Senate. TikTok was supposed to be banned, or they're trying to ban TikTok in the US. And they were just talking about the livelihood of the millions of people that make their living on TikTok.
That's right.
So straight to your point, David,
if
TikTok goes away, because they're deliberating right now, if TikTok goes away in the US, what do you have? As far as those creators go, nothing.
All their eggs are in one basket. So.
You betcha.
Yeah. And we all know, diversity is important. If you're investing, you want to be diversified, and you are investing, whether you're a serious amateur who's just making art your audience is still important to you, and no more or less than the person who's doing it to make a living. But if you suddenly lose your audience, that's devastating. And if that's the only place you're connecting with them, wow. If you're nowhere else, if you're not, in part, this is why I love doing things like podcasts. because it's searchable, it's out there. It's not just part of the Insta stream that's going to disappear in a couple days. It'll be there for a long time, and people can get value out of this conversation for a long time. To have entirely built everything on a social platform that someone else owns I want to be kind, but it's kind of foolish, like it's
for sure.
Yeah, you're right.
To not have, and whereas I am constantly saying, look, you'll get the best of me if you allow me to send you an email every 2 weeks. That is, it's not, I mean, occasionally I say, hey, I've got a course that's coming out, but for the most part, it's something that I put a lot of time and energy into. People that are subscribers, they are the first ones to see my new monographs and, just to get free stuff and access to me. I won't lose any of that. I mean, if MailChimp disappeared, I would still have the data file, the CSV file that at least allows me to migrate to a different service. I'm never, unless someone says, I want to unsubscribe, and in which case I go and cry in the corner, because most of my subscribers, they're important to me. I'm like, what did I do?
Yeah.
But I maintain that. But anyway, it's a long conversation about something that I prefer to give less and less thought to. But it is important, I think. Because the question is, how does it affect me as a creative person? How does it affect my ability to be a unique individual, say the things I want to say in the way I want to say them? Audience matters, and I would never pretend it doesn't.
So what do you do now to grow that audience? Now, you have your subscribers to your newsletter, you have your subscribers on, say, Instagram. So do you primarily, is it primarily more like word of mouth now? Or if, like you said, doing podcasts, maybe that'll introduce you to, a bunch of new possible subscribers, that sort of thing. So is there anything else that you're doing to increase your reach, to grow your, like, say, your newsletter or that sort of thing? Or is it more organic?
I mean, everything starts with my understanding of the value that I bring to this world, and only part of that, and I wouldn't even say the biggest part, is my photography. I think if I'm going to leave any kind of impact behind, after I'm gone or while I'm still here, it's going to be my words more than it is my photographs. It's going to be my speaking. It's going to be my teaching, my books. And I hope in conjunction with my photographs, I hope those also do something for people. But if you don't understand what your value is, so we're kind of getting into a business conversation here, but even if you just do this for the love of it, it's important to understand what you're all about and what value you bring to the world. So that your audience knows, like, okay, this is what that guy, most artists, you could go, oh, he's the guy that, and you, a little bit pigeonholed, but I think it's important. I think it's good that people know, oh, he's that person that, or she's that photographer who does this. So you got to start there. And then it's a question of, how can I share that in as many ways as possible? How can I share that? One of the best things I did over the pandemic and continue to do is I put together a 1 hour lecture that I did over Zoom to camera clubs. And for a little while there were camera clubs were super hungry for virtual speakers because they couldn't bring anyone in. I did a presentation. I charged what I thought was, a reasonable amount, but not inaccessible. And every week I was sitting down here in my studio doing a presentation to a camera club somewhere around the world. And it happens that those camera clubs, they are my people. And I'm not a joiner. I've never belonged to a camera club, but it's the people in those camera clubs. They're absolutely my people. And so in the middle of the presentation, I made an offer. I didn't sell them anything, but I said, look, if you want to get a little bit more about this one thing, I was talking about depth, visual depth in photographs. I said, I can't talk all night long about this, but I'd love to. I do have an ebook about it. And if you want to download it, and you can go to, and I gave them, it's yourbonusresources.com. They go to yourbonusresources.com, and I'm just like, tell me where to send it. And I will also send you this. And I had a couple other freebies, and fully disclose, I'll also start sending you the contact sheet, which is the name of the email I send out every 2 weeks. I had thousands of people that were well qualified because they just watched me speak for like 40 minutes. Like if they weren't going to sign up for the stuff if they thought I was an idiot. Well, they might, but it's just very few of them. Most of them were like, I like this guy and I want more of what he's, dishing out. It was all free, and they joined my mailing list, and for the most part, they have stayed. It's a very high retention rate because they know what they're getting. I'm not tricking them into download this thing. They know what they're getting into.
For sure.
And so that's just one way. You can speak at your public library. You can speak at your public library and show your images and give people a URL that's easily remembered or a QR code that they can get onto your list so that I can, for example, I'll send you an email with a picture of the day or a picture of the month or whatever. There are a lot of people that aren't on Insta. There are a lot of people that will never open social, and to restrict your growth to only people on social would be to miss a huge opportunity. So there's a lot of ways. Like ultimately, I think social has made us lazy as communicators, as photographers trying to get our work out into the world. It's like, well, it's social or nothing. Not so. Like there's a lot of ways to get your work out into the world. It's a little more old school. It's a little less scalable. But I would argue that the contacts are better. The connections are stronger and more, they're less easily lost. Social is just full of snake oil and hucksters compared to going and meeting people and doing public. The photographer that just spoke to like the Rotary clubs in their state or province for a year, showing their work and maybe doing back of room sales for calendars or whatever, prints, would probably come out of that if they were also very keen on getting people onto their mailing list and serving that audience. They'd probably do very well, and they wouldn't have to be on social at all. But there's this idea of social, like, yeah, but I'm missing out. Are we really? You're missing out on the illusion of having a big audience. You're missing out on the numbers and the likes. But again, do they really mean anything? For some, they do, but not for everyone.
We just want to take a quick break to give a shout out to our title sponsor, The Camera Store in Calgary, Alberta.
The Camera Store is where we go for all our photography and video gear. Whether you're a beginner or a seasoned professional, they've got you covered.
Plus, they ship right across Canada with free shipping on most orders over $99. You can find everything you need at thecamerastore.com.
What did you do before social media, David? I'm trying to recall, and correct me if I'm wrong if this is not you, but I think before the whole social media thing, did you not print like postcard type images and leave them at coffee shops?
I did.
And
I did. Yeah.
See, I remember that about you. Now that was a long time ago.
Yeah, I called it Left and Found, and
That's
I
right.
just to be honest, it didn't. It was another one of those things that it was like I could maybe keep doing this if I wanted to, but I got distracted by something else. I'm a great believer in quitting. Everyone was like, a bunch of quitters. I'm like, you know what? If it's not working for you, or if you genuinely lose interest, so for a while, I printed out a bunch of these things. I stamped them at the back. I stamped them with leftandfound.com, which I no longer own, but people would go to it and they could see what the photograph was. And so it was an idea that I think if I lived I live on Vancouver Island now. There's no one, the dogs and cats in the neighborhoods would see that stuff before humans did. But if you lived in a place with a big enough demographic, if you were in New York City, you just leave them places, and it wasn't like I didn't leave a stack. I would just leave one here and one
That's
here.
Right. You're saying
and
that,
people would be like, "Oh, what's that?" And it was a limited edition. I'd only do a certain amount. I'd number them, assign them like they were a piece of art, and I would just leave them around. And I think for the person in the right place with the right kind of art, it's subversive, and it could do quite well. So, there's lots of, there was a time when we all had to do business without the internet. We all had to figure out how to get our work out there. And it just required a little more legwork. Like it was good, honest, actual get out there and meet people kind of work. And we've become really lazy. It's like, people now, it's like, what's your marketing plan? I'm on social. That's not a marketing plan.
Yeah, for sure. I post twice a day. Yeah, that's that sort of thing for sure. No, that's crazy. It just came to mind, David. I was just like,
Funny.
we're just talking about that. It's like, I remember you saying that way back. So you're talking about photos or pictures and words. Well, you got something under your monitor there. Did you want to talk a little bit about your book, Light, Space, and Time? Yeah.
I had a wild year 2 years ago. It was, and I bring these things on myself, but for some reason I scheduled like all kinds of stuff, not the least of which was writing this book, Light, Space, and Time. I scheduled to have my right leg amputated below the knee. Not giving any thought to the fact that I was going to be on pain meds while trying to write this very serious book, but I think it turned out okay. My mom asked me as I was writing it, she's like, "So what's this one about?" And I had to be very honest with her. I said, "Mom, it's about the same thing all my other books are about, just with different words and different pictures, because I occupy." I think of a unique space in the photo world. That doesn't mean it's a better or more needed space. It's just that everyone else is talking about the gear, and I want to talk about the human stuff. I want to talk about creativity. I want to talk about why we resonate with certain elements in a photograph. I want to talk about like the human stuff. And I mentioned it earlier in our conversation, but I do believe that after a certain point, our biggest challenges as photographers are not technical. If you're struggling with a technical thing, you can go to YouTube. There are uber geeks out there who are really good at this stuff, who will explain it far better than I ever could in way fewer words. I'm not known for brevity. I want to talk about the human stuff. And so Light, Space, and Time is the subtitle is Essays on Camera Craft and Creativity. And it features all my wildlife work. So it's kind of like a mashup between a coffee table book and 20 thoughtful essays that affect us as, the issues that affect us as creatives, the way that we compare ourselves to each other, or even the way that the title comes from this belief that I have that good photographers need to use their imagination to understand or to envision, to imagine how the camera sees the world. And the camera sees the world differently than us in terms of light, space, and time. And if we can kind of get a hold of this, we stop bashing our heads against the camera because it's not doing what we want. And we start to, as creative people, consider the possibilities that the camera can see space differently than we can, based on depth of field, based on the type of lens that we have on. It can see time differently based on our choice of shutter speed. And it can see light differently than we ever could. We can't look out at a scene and in our mind, with our eyes, underexposed by 5 stops or overexpose it. Our eyes are just, they do their job too well, but the camera still has ways of seeing the world that we don't. And so that's a creative challenge. And it's part of what, why I wrote Light, Space, and Time is if we could all just look, the cameras are important. The craft is so important. Your skills as they feel more and more instinctive, that's so important, but it is insufficient. It is, you cannot simply buy the best camera out there and expect that you will make compelling photographs that connect to either the emotion or the imagination of others, much less yourself. And so I think these conversations need to be had. I think people need to be encouraged to have those conversations, encouraged to feel like maybe they're not alone in the fact that they compare themselves to other people, or that they fear missing out. Or risk is a huge part of photography. Like if we're not having conversations even just with ourselves about what we're willing to risk, how many times have you put the camera to your face and you're like, I don't know, is it going to work? Is it not? And all that time deliberating about risk is time we're putting off the reward of potentially making a phenomenal photograph. Because I don't know, is it gonna work? Or taking the risk of doing something new. How many of us have got to a point where we're like, I think I'm So Bill Watterson, who did the Calvin and Hobbes comics, at a certain point he retired, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, but he got to a point where he said he felt like he was mowing the same patch of grass over and over again.
Yeah.
So what's our relationship to repetition? Are we willing to risk trying that new thing and stepping away, or are we like, oh, but what are people on social going to think? Well, let them think what they want. If you suddenly decide that you're going to, Beyonce is suddenly going to sing country, great, knock yourself out. Yes, you'll lose some people, but you'll gain others. And most importantly, you will be exploring what it means to be the photographer that you're becoming. And yet we never have these conversations. And so I think, but we all face these things. I think silently we sort of sit and we stew so my hope is to give people greater creative freedom that will result in better, stronger photographs. Again, photographs that aren't just good, but are our own, they're yours. When people look at it, they're like, I know exactly who made that. And I have friends on Insta. I'll scroll through and I'll be like, I know exactly who that is.
Sure. Oh, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's a matter of voice. Are we having conversations about voice? What does that mean? So those are the conversations that I want to have. And on some level, all of my books are kind of about that, tackling it from a bit of a different angle. But ultimately, I think it's important. And I think those conversations aren't being had. I think the one book that's about the size that everyone's really familiar with is the B&H catalog. And I'm like, if you could just also put this in your hands, because again, it's a left hand, right hand thing. They work together, and as humans, we're always like, yeah, but is it this or is it? Come on, David, is it gear or is it vision? I'm like, why can't it be both? Like we're mature people at this point. I mean, we're older people at this point. We can hold two truths to be true at the same time.
True.
It's both. You cannot possibly, you can't be a great guitarist without knowing your craft, and the guitar matters. But unless you also understand music and have something to sing about, they got to go like this. And the minute you grapple with stuff, comparing yourself to others, and that forces you to put the guitar down, or, back to us photographers, put the camera down, because I did this Insta post today on shame.
Yes.
And
you did.
Said, shame will stop you from taking the camera out of the bag. And if that's the case, that's a creative problem that needs to be addressed. And for some reason, we put that on like, but that's something I need to talk to my therapist about. No, it's not. I mean, maybe, yes, maybe it is, but it's also something as creatives we can all say, really, you too? I struggle with that as well. And then we all feel a little bit better. We feel like we're a little less alone, and we feel a little less self-conscious about, taking the camera out of the bag and doing that goofy thing. How many times have I not made a photograph because I thought someone was, looking at me, or I've predicted their reaction to that photograph, which hasn't even been made yet, and already I'm putting the camera away.
Exactly.
All that stuff happens in this fuzzy hairball brain of, certainly that's what I feel like mine is. So I'm a long way away from the question, but that's what light, space, and time is about. It's that creative thing, and but here's what I worry about is that people look at that and they're like, yeah, but it's not really that pragmatic. I would argue this is the most pragmatic stuff. If you can't access this and think thoughts about what you want the photograph to feel like, how are you going to choose between 30th of a second and 3,000th of a second? How are you going to choose your depth of field? How are you going to choose your lens and where you stand and your point of view? How are you going to choose what to do in post-processing when it comes to color combinations or dodging and burning, if you can't even go, this is what I want the image to feel like? Because all of these are feeling things, right? When we talk about warmth, color temperature, we talk about warmer or cooler. That's not a visual word. That's a feeling word. And there's so much of that in photography. But if we're not willing to sit, if our editing approach is just, I'm just going to hit a bunch of presets until I find one that looks better, looks good, how do you even make that decision? How do you put a lens on your camera without understanding, is the picture about this or is it about that? Is it about this or is it about that? All of these decisions have to come from a place of, I've got something to say about whatever it is I'm looking at. And and everything's going to be affected by your shutter speed, your aperture. All these technical things ultimately serve a creative end. But I was never taught that stuff. I was just taught to get the exposure correct. I was taught to, focus correctly and sharply. And so it was a lot of do it right, not, and get it perfect. No one was ever talking about the poetry of it. No one was ever talking about the creativity of it. That's sort of something I had to stumble onto purely because the other stuff just dissatisfied me. Well, it took a long time.
I was just curious after, you're just talking about that in your book. Do you have any formal training in any of this as far as your, photography or your philosophies, how you grew your vision and what to look for? Or is this all based primarily, like you said, you can learn the camera stuff, or is this primarily based on just your life experiences and, getting out there and shooting and...
It's definitely the latter. I'm honestly, I'm just making this shit up as I go. But I'll tell you what, 5 years in theology school, you get really good at being introspective and thinking about, the sort of the fuzzy stuff. No, I did a high school photography class when I was 16, and then everything after that has been, I hesitate to say self-taught because nobody is self-taught. We are, a combination of all of our influences, and Freeman Patterson was incredibly important to me as I,
absolutely
reading his books. If you read through everything I've ever written and then go read Freeman Patterson, you'd be like, oh, that's where that comes from. He is. And I didn't realize it till recently. I picked up one of his books again just to, read a few things. And I was like, oh my God, like it's his voice that's been rattling around in the back of my head for all these years. So there've been a lot of influences, and I'm very lucky to have some incredibly good photographers as friends that, we rub off on each other. Right. So I've learned beautiful things from all kinds of different sources, but none of them were anything that I would call formal in any way.
Cool. No, that's awesome. You'd mentioned, and I hope it's okay, but you just mentioned about your leg.
Yeah.
Did you want to just talk a little bit about that? I know the story behind it, but did you want to kind of share that with the audience?
It came from me being stupid. I don't know that my family has a motto, but if it did, it would be, well, that didn't go as planned. A story of my life, right? Creatively and otherwise. But I was in Italy 12 years ago, and I angled for a shot that I probably shouldn't have angled for. And it involved hopping down onto a ledge that was part of a 30-foot wall. I was at the top, but not for very long.
Wow.
And when I landed, I crushed both my feet. I cracked my pelvis, and it sort of set into motion a lot of surgeries. And it was pretty bad. Like the ER doctor in Italy didn't speak a lot of English, but he had enough to tell me that I was never going to walk the same way again. Then he said something funny. He said, you'll always walk with a limp, but he said, you'll limp with both feet, so it won't look like a limp. And to this day, I have no idea what he was going on about. I started laughing so hard. Of course, I'm lying literally, like they've cut my clothes off. I'm lying naked on this table with a catheter, and I'm just dying, tears running down my face because I think this is the funniest damn thing. But it was prophetic in a way, and I over time it got worse and worse. And I had a meeting with my surgeon at one point. I said, we got to come up with a solution. She said, well, this is as good as it gets. And I have those are fighting words for me. And so I said, well, does anyone ever just choose to amputate? And she said, yeah, some people choose that, but I could tell she wasn't really into this conversation. So it was another couple of years. And finally I went back and I said, look, we got to talk about this. I had talked to some other surgeons, and I was convinced, and all of them said the same thing, barring any weird complications, this could give you your life back. And I knew certainly that if I didn't, I would spend more and more time on the couch, less and less time doing the things I wanted to do. I couldn't walk uphill because my ankle had been fused. And so I was using I was walking a bit like a goat. I was walking on the ball of my foot. Well, that was getting arthritic. And that, you can only walk so far doing that before your back's sore, and it was a mess. And so finally I said, look, guys, I got one life, and I want to take want to live as best as I can, not on the couch. And so June 5th, a year and a half ago, went in. 90 minutes later, they were wheeling me out without my right foot. So just below the knee, 6 inches below the knee. So there's enough to get into a prosthesis. And so, it's, people have said that it must have taken a lot of courage, and I'm not, maybe. But that doesn't mean I wasn't scared. I was scared if I didn't do it, what my life was going to look like. I was scared that I would do fewer and fewer of the adventures I wanted to. I would spend less and less times in the outdoors, and having a cool. Let's face it. I mean, a prosthetic leg looks really badass, and so I was like, it's any excuse to get a little more carbon fiber in my life. It looks pretty cool. But I mean, I'm doing things now. A year and a half later, I'm back at it. I'm training. I've got a great trainer. I'm doing things in the gym I haven't been able to do for years. I'm doing box jumps. I'm leg pressing 300 pounds. This is
good for you.
This has given me my life back. So, yeah, it's inconvenient in the middle of the night when you want to get up and go to the bathroom. You got to put your rig on, and it's there's phantom pain, which I didn't really understand, and that is a whole thing. It's friggin' awful. But on balance, I have absolutely no regrets, which, is a good thing, because it's not like I could go back to my surgeon and go, it's been a good probationary period. I'd like to get my leg back. So, it has worked out really well. And my physiotherapist finally I like to say she fired me, but she gave me a hug and said, we're done here. Like, we're as far as you can go. Like, and my prosthetist is at this point, he's like, everything's good. Come back when you need me. So
crazy.
Yeah, it's been pretty wild, and it's been a real reminder of what's important to me. This is not a test run. As best as I can tell, this life is where we are not like, we don't get a do-over on this. And so some of these choices, you spend the rest of your life deliberating. Do I, don't I, But I think in part the creative life is about, you make a decision, and if it doesn't go to plan, you know what, you shift the plan and you respond to that. And, everything's so it's not really a surprise that my life is like a bit of a zigzag, except that I think if you pull back far enough, there's a relatively straight line. It's heading somewhere. I just haven't figured out where yet.
Well, just the self-awareness to know that your life will be better, with doing the application and then just moving forward and just running with it. You know what I mean? It's just, that's crazy, because I think most people, myself included, would be freaking out with the idea of, losing the leg, what it entails. Like, okay, how am I going to deal with this, or learn to live with this when I still have my lane? But I guess you don't really know until you live through the pain and all the suffering, like everything with, you just know that it wasn't going to get any better, right? So you just had to kind of make that.
Yeah, it's a long realization, Joe. I mean, it's not, I think for anyone that's faced with, I broke my FedEx lady one day because she came to the door with a box that very clearly there were some custom built crutches. And I was getting ready to, for this whole thing, and not a day went by when I was like, am I crazy? Like, holy cow. And she came to the door and she said, well, I hope no one needs this. And before I could even really figure out a good way to say it, I found out there is no good way to ease into this, but I basically says, well, I'm getting my leg amputated next month. And her eyes filled with tears. And it was I went back into the house. I'm like, Cynthia, I broke the FedEx because when it's so sudden, but when it's after 12 years of pain and increasing or decreasing mobility, your opportunities are decreasing. You're like, I'm only going to live so long. Like, if I'm going to do this, I want to do it when I'm 50, not when I'm 60, not when I'm 75, and have no, what am I going to do then? I wanted to heal as fast as I could.
Yep.
I wanted to have the most amount of functional life. It probably looks very different to everyone else. But I think isn't that always the case though? Like, especially with the creative life, when we look at other people and we envy where they are and the art that they make and the books or the awards or whatever, and we have no idea the price that they've paid to get there. You know, the
Very
work
true.
that they've put in. Like everyone wants the prize. No one wants to put in the hard work.
Yeah.
And I think it's similar in the sense that you would look at this and go, oh my God, that's so big. But there was a long, there were a lot of tears. There were a lot of, am I crazies? There were a lot of phone calls to people that like prosthetists and surgeons going like, am I nuts? And so it was a long accumulation of people going, no, like friends going, you are making absolutely the right decision. To the point where when the day of the surgery came in, like my wife was scared. She was nervous. She was all a bundle of emotions. And I was like, let's get this thing going. Like I was so ready. My big fear was not getting my foot amputated that day. My big fear was I was going to wake up and the damn thing was still going to be there. And I would have to start over again. Come on, you know? So yeah, it's been a thing, but you know what? We all have a thing, right? We're all missing something. And in this case, it's not it was a bit of a gamble. I admit that things can always go south, but it was a really educated gamble. And I knew what life would be like if I didn't get it done. And that scared me enough to go, okay, this is worth it. And now this is like, I'm way past even where, to be honest, where I thought I might be. So it was worth it.
That's awesome.
It was worth it. And like I said, the carbon fiber is cool. You wear shorts and people are like, that's badass. You know, I don't have to open my mouth anymore to inspire people. I go into the gym or the grocery store and people are like, you're so inspiring. And rather than go, that's the stupidest thing anyone's ever said to me. I'm like, well, thank you. You know,
and here's my QR code, you know,
that's right. Here's my QR code. Buy my book.
Just embrace it. Exactly.
Oh, that's crazy. Wow. So no, that's great that you had that tipping point where I know my life will be better. Yeah, so you make that decision and then just go for it. And obviously, like you said, you've made the absolute right decision. And yeah, you're living life. You're off to Kenya. You're doing, you know what I mean? Nothing's holding you back.
Yeah, I've never done well with those limitations. I was bullied a lot as a kid. And I think at the time I didn't really love it. In fact, it was awful. But it has made me one of these people that, like, when you say don't press the red button, I'm going to press it just to spite you.
Sure. Yeah.
So the more people are, be like, I don't think you should. I'm like, hold my beer.
Watch me. Yeah.
So,
did you find your photography skills or your style changing while you were in that pain over the years? And then once you had the amputation and your style started going in a different direction, or you found yourself the ability to do a few different things and taking more chances, or not really? It's staying even keel.
I mean, certainly my ability to do things has improved.
Okay.
But it's interesting you asked that. Someone else asked me, and it didn't twig, but toward the end, my work was, I don't think what I was saying through my work was getting darker at all, but certainly I was more attracted to black and white, dark shadows, contrasty, like it was a little grittier. And now if you go to my Insta feed, you'd be like, who is this guy? Right? Like it is quite a jump. There are a lot of similarities in terms of how I choose my moments, and my compositions are still very similar. But now I'm using a lot of color. I'm very hesitant to work in black and white. And I think a little bit of that might be that I've kind of got my mojo back a little. Like I'm a little more hopeful, which is weird because right now I'm not hopeful about the world. I'm not hopeful about a lot of things, but just maybe personally,
sure.
that may account for that. And I didn't think about that until just now, but certainly if like the book that I released during the day of that everyone was told to stay in their houses, like March 17th or something, right at the beginning of the pandemic, was the day my book Heart of the Photograph came out. It was the worst time. It was like, that was the day Amazon was like, yeah, we're not sending books out today. We're going to focus on, masks and stuff.
Oh no.
But if you look at that book and you look at Light, Space, and Time, like I said, there's a lot of similarities, but very different. Like the images in this book are color, they're vibrant, they're hopeful. So yeah, I think there may be something to that.
That is absolutely crazy. So you could almost put it on a timeline and almost look at the progression of your photography and say, okay, yeah, looking at these images, I might have been in a darker time, and then this time frame here, I've just recently with your new book, things began to look up, or you had your amputation and you're feeling better, and you're more active, you're able to travel, and then all this stuff kind of changed. So
maybe even unbeknownst to you, it just happened.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's.
Maybe. I think I need to do a little bit more navel gazing about that. But I think there's probably, but isn't there always with all of our work? I mean, I think the mood that we're in, the way we're thinking about things, it does affect the kind of photographs that we make. And so it certainly would
100%.
not surprise me. It wouldn't be inconsistent with what I believe about the fact that what's on the inside eventually makes it. If you're a bored photographer, you're going to make boring photographs. If you're very chaotic in your thinking, you're probably going to make very chaotic and photographs. So it wouldn't surprise me that the more hopeful I felt about things, the more hopeful and hate to use the word cheerful, but certainly I'm using more color in my work, and
for sure.
I think it's more cheerful.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I don't know why I air quoted cheerful.
Well, I have to tell you, I mean, I've been going through your new book, and I haven't read the whole thing yet, but I mean, it's even changing even my perspective of thinking about, you capture a photo and create something in post-processing. Well, no, let's capture a photo and create it from the beginning, because that's where the photo should be thought about more, and understanding the composition and create the photo there rather than create something after the fact. And it's kind of even changed my outlook just even in the first few pages. So
that's interesting. Yeah, I think that's a funny thing, because in my mind, it's always both. I mean, I love post-processing, and people are constantly saying, oh, well, did it really look like that? And I hate that question. Oh my God. It drives me. I was like, talk about adventures and missing the point. So yes, I use a lot of post-production, but it's like, I think of it as a left hand and a right hand. The camera's really good at doing certain things, and there are things that you must get right. Can't change the moment after the fact, and there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. But I also am, in my thinking, I'm like, there's a better tool for, like, for example, now I rarely use filters. Polarizers and ND filters would be, in terms of like slowing the shutter and stuff. Mm-hmm. Yes. So it's getting rid of reflections, things that I couldn't do in post, but I'm using less of those now, because I'm like, I can darken the sky by 3 stops in post if I want to, if it's not about slowing the shutter. Mm-hmm. There are just tools that are so I'm using, like, I just finished doing a short course on creating a short course on masking, because I use the masking tools in Lightroom probably more than anything. I very rarely now develop an image using like the global tools. I'm just using the local stuff in masking, and doing this to this and this to that part. And what we can do in masking is amazing.
And Lightroom's changed so much in the last year as well, with the ability on that side.
It's so improved in so many ways. Even the ability to remove, our ability to, like, the generative remove tool.
Yeah.
And I'm not the kind of guy who's going to change out skies, and the content of my images remains the same. I'm not saying other people shouldn't. I have no rules where art's concerned, just where my own creation is concerned. But I will, like, for example, I made this photograph in South Africa that I'm so thrilled with a little leopard cub, and it had just rained, and when it rains, the dung beetles come out. And so there were these brightly colored dung beetles around on the ground, and some of them were flying, and a dung beetle was flying around, and this leopard was sort of playing with it, very young leopard. And I don't know how I got it. Talk about a Hail Mary pass. I was just like, well, let's see, this isn't going to work out. And I got one frame where this brightly colored beetle is like flying, and the leopard's gaze is right on it. Got the tip of his tongue just sticking out, and it's tack sharp.
Mm-hmm.
And but when I first looked at it, I was like, oh, look at all the, like that stupid branch and this. And just on a whim, I thought, I'm going to try these new generative remove tools, and it blew my mind. Like I was sitting in, in my little room at the safari camp, and I was just like, because in the past, especially in Lightroom, I remember one time I was trying to, if you're photographing underwater, you get a lot of crap in the water, and I was in Tonga, and I was photographing humpback whales, and there was crap in the water, and I'm trying to bit by bit get some of this. And I, using Lightroom, using the clone tool, which was never very good, I clicked on right in the middle of the ocean, this spot of whatever. And it's sampled from the whale's eyeball and put a perfect eyeball in the middle of the friggin' ocean. And I was like, I don't know who's in charge of this in Lightroom, but they should lose their job. For years, it was that bad. It was some version of that bad. And all of a sudden, now I'm like, whoop, on a branch, and it's just like, and I'm like,
that's crazy.
And it gives you 6 options or whatever. Yeah, it's like, no, that's the one. And it's just like, so for things like, if there's a tick on an animal in a spot that I don't like, and I'm not a photojournalist, I don't subscribe to the same ethics that they do because it's not my job. So if there's a tick in the middle of a leopard's, the rim of their eye, I'll remove it. If, and it used to be so hard. And now those tricky spots, I'm just like, boop, gone. It's just like, all right, moving on. Yeah. So I, sure. As much as I trash talk some of the advances in technology, and man, sometimes they let us do our jobs so well. And so that's encouraged me. Yeah, you're right. It has changed so much over the last year, and the masking tools, especially. Here's one that I love. Like, I love to sort of amplify what the light's doing. And so let's say I want to make the light kind of come across the leopard's face on this one side, but light, light sort of fades off. And so I want to use like a linear gradient to kind of fade off. Well, in the past, we would have to draw a linear gradient, and then we would have to paint it out and whatever. Now Lightroom has, in masking, you can intersect that. And it's kind of hidden. It's like a right click on the thing, but you can go intersect with and then choose by subject. And so then it will take that radial gradient and only apply it to the leopard's face. And then I can drag that linear gradient to exactly where I want. I can dial it down. It's mind-blowing.
That is
crazy.
It's sick. And so you can do that. You can intersect it with the sky, or so using some of these AI tools.
Sure.
We could have a whole conversation about AI. I'm not really generally on board with most of it, but there's some little things that I'm like, oh my God, like the AI preset, like you can make a preset out of, so for example, if I make a preset, on a lot of my photographs, I will do select subject, and I'll brighten it a little bit, maybe warm it up or give it some texture. And then I will do the opposite. I will select the background and darken it a little bit, maybe cool it down, maybe take the texture down a little, just to guide the eye back into the frame. Well, now I can create a preset that on every image will identify the subject, brighten it, warm it, give it texture. Then it will do the background, the opposite of that, all in one. And it's one preset, and I go, bing, there it is.
That's unbelievable.
It's crazy. It's really, and so, you could do several of those. If you're a landscape photographer, brighten the foreground, do whatever you do with the sky, darken it, desaturate, whatever, the thing that you find yourself doing over and over again for all of these photographs. Now it's still your thing. You're still doing it, but instead of taking 30 to 40 minutes to do it to every image, it's like one click. And you could even on import apply that preset in your develop on import, and it comes in and it's already done.
That's
crazy.
I'm still old school, it's primarily, it is.
You're still using coat hangers and stuff to dodge and burn in a dark room.
It's crazy. Oh my God, you've inspired me to actually go online and watch a few YouTube videos about Lightroom, because I'm still using it the way it was 5 years ago. I've obviously just, discovered, like you said, as far as the removal tool, it's absolutely crazy, crazy good. I used to have to just export into Photoshop to do that, right, and then import back into the Lightroom and, that kind of stuff. And with the dust, that sort of thing. But I wasn't even aware of all the stuff you even just said. So
it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And the masking, the accuracy of the masking now has changed so much from what it used to be.
Better.
Like it's
Absolutely.
unbelievable. I just remember having to paint around it. Now it's like, it's almost like when they added animal eye detect to our cameras or whatever. It's almost kind of feels like cheating, but man, it saves so much time.
It is crazy. And now in masking, you can choose according to luminance range and color range. And so there are if all you want is texture added to your blues, which you could never have done before without I don't even know how you would do it. Yeah. Now you can be like, okay, choose the greens and add texture. Only, like there are some things that we could have used other tools like the color mixer, but now with masking, it's almost got to the point where there's very few things other than the color mixer, there are very few things that I will go into like the global adjustments.
Sure.
They're crazy. And they're so, as you said, accurate. I would love to see a little bit more ability to feather some of those selections.
Fair enough. Yeah.
For some of the smart, like the subject, for example, I'd love to see a sort of a I don't know, a feather function or something, but yeah, it's great. And this is where I think where there's that intersection between the geeks and the artists and the geeks, which I think I talked about in like within the frame. Because I think the ideal place is somewhere in that space where they meet, that you can use all of these tools to accomplish something really artistic and beautiful, rather than be an artist that doesn't have the tools, or a geek that has nothing to do with his tools.
Yeah.
So there's that kind of that sweet spot where it's like, I don't need to know everything. Like I probably know 5% of what my cameras do. They're incredibly complicated. I don't need that many functions. But if I do, I can go to Google and find it. And Lightroom's the same thing. It's like when you learn a few more tools, suddenly the creative possibilities open up. You get a 600 millimeter lens, suddenly you can do things you couldn't with your 300.
Sure.
So again, I've been living under the shadow of this gear is good, vision is better thing. I wrote that in within the frame, like 15 years ago or something. And I've been living with it ever since, because people are like, now I know you don't like to talk about gear. I'm like, whoa, hang on. I will talk about gear. I just want to talk about it in context of what we're trying to accomplish with the gear. I don't want to pixel peep. I couldn't even tell you how many megapixels, because honestly, megapixels aren't even a thing anymore. Like for me, and ISO, like noise with the ability in Lightroom, there's a command called enhance. And I think you just go up to photo, enhance, and it will give you like, I've cropped images down to like 3,000 on the long side. And I'm like, it's a little small. I go to enhance. Now I have like 9,000 on the long side. And I'm looking at it, I'm going, how? It's better. It's better. Yes. Yeah. And so then I run it through, like I use DxO Pure Raw 2, which I have no like affiliation, or I know Topaz makes stuff. I didn't like the Topaz tools, but this DxO Pure Raw 2 sharpens, denoises, it'll do like lens correction stuff. And I run that through, and suddenly I've got like a 9,000 by whatever the math is, 6,000 photograph that's sharp and noise free. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, so megapixels don't seem to matter. I mean, of course they sort of matter, but you know what I'm saying? Like some of these things, we've got to a point where it's like, what do you want to do? Because the tools are all there. And it's pretty exciting.
Technology has advanced so fast. Like I even think, like you were just saying about bringing the geeks and the creatives together. I think Adobe was lacking for quite a while, and I think maybe that has happened because the tools have gotten so much better, and the ability that they've given us photographers on the software and on the cameras, it's gone. To me, it's just been the last 5 years. It's unbelievable.
When I switched from Fuji, now admittedly this is apples to oranges, but when I switched from Fujifilm to Sony, I felt like I had just given up my 4x5 field camera and like gone into the space age or something. Because to your point, there was the eye focus at the time. Fuji didn't have that, and I had this fast camera that would do 30 frames a second. And I remember on Safari, I went on Safari very soon after that. And I photographed a cheetah running across the frame, and but diagonally. So going away from me across and I remember going, brrr. It was not for a photograph. There's no good reason to photograph the arse end of an animal, but to shoot the fastest land mammal on full tear, every single frame was tack sharp. Jeez. And it was just like, whoa. And so again, it was a garbage photograph. I mean, I think a lot of people are like, it's tack sharp. Yeah, okay, but it's still a garbage photograph. But the possibility that I could now make a tack sharp photograph that wasn't garbage, if I added some creativity to it and, paid attention to the light and blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
Yeah, it is just amazing.
Did something like that, just that little bit of technology, did that kind of renew or rejuvenate you a little bit again? Like, did it get you like excited to get back? I was like, okay, now I've got this tool that you can go beyond what you could before. So does it just, you see things in a new light and you're just like, okay,
it made
cool,
things so much less frustrating.
Yeah.
I knew that I was working with the right tool, and I always tell people, look, it doesn't matter what camera you get ultimately, whether it's Sony or Fuji or Nikon, whatever, get the one that fits in your hand and get the one that is going to get out of the way the fastest. And only what, how you like to shoot, only what you like to photograph. It may be that you don't need a full frame and an APS-C sensor is fine because you're not doing A, B, and C. You're doing, HIJK, whatever. You're doing different things, but get a tool that gets out of the way as fast as possible. And when suddenly all those frustrations were gone, it allowed me to think of other things instead of, oh my God, why won't it focus? Although that in the moment, I could now think about composition a little bit more seriously. So anything that you can offload into the I don't have to worry about that category frees your attention span to think about the things that actually make a difference. You can be paying attention to the moment and to the light and the things that actually someone will respond to in your photograph, because your brain isn't just constantly in triage mode, like gotta. So it changed things a lot. I was a much happier photographer after I dropped. Again, that gear worked great for a particular context. I changed the context. It wasn't the gear's fault, but now it didn't work. And I was pretty frustrated for a while there.
And it's hard to go back to the old way too, isn't it? Like once you have that gear that works that good, it's hard to pick up the old stuff. So,
well, are any of us, really focusing manually that much of the time anymore? When I learned, that was all we had, and we were all very suspicious when AF came out. It's like, oh, I don't know, still can't beat, the good old. And I'm like,
I don't know how we did it. I really don't. I remember the prism, right? The prism that get it in focus, right? I just, and trying to capture stuff and the pre-focus and all the manual stuff. And I mean, I did weddings in manual focus. I did, I don't know how I did it. I honestly did not know.
Even manual, like I tell my students, like, you've got to know how to get to your manual settings. And because if you're photographing a lion in long grass, I tell you what, I think some engineer in Sony just really likes grass, and he's built in if it's grass, make it sharp filter. Because I photographed my buddy John. He's like, every damn time, So there are times where it's like, you better know how to get into manual, but now we've got this ability to to visualize what's in focus, and so I'll get I think it's just called focus. What's it called? Focus peaking. Focus peaking.
Focus.
Yep. And so you're just going along, and it's like you can see these red lines in the image, and it's just like they creep into, and then once the lion's eye is the sharp, it's in red. It's like, okay, there's my focus zone. Now I'm good to go. To have done that on, like you said, Joe, with one of those old like split prisms, oh my God, and the low light, like it really is amazing. And as excited as I am about the tech, what I'm excited about is the possibilities, because it allows us to make photographs. Like, no wonder we're looking at wildlife photographs now that we couldn't have made 40 years ago.
Sure.
Like, we just could not have, and now I'm seeing stuff on a day-to-day basis that just blows me away. And I think that's cool. Like, that sense of wonder, I love that. And I think I'm mostly at a point where I can see those pictures and not want to throw my stuff into the ocean and just give up or send hate mail to the very talented photographer that made them. I'm almost there. There's a level of maturity that I have yet to acquire.
Well, you made a good point, though. With any new camera system or whatever you have, learn the craft, like learn the camera, so you don't have to like learn it to the point where it's almost like an extension of your arm, so you can concentrate on the creative side of things. Like
The
if you're
stuff that
there trying
matters.
to, that's right. If you're trying to fiddle or trying to find out where your shutter, how to adjust your shutters, whatever it is, learn that part really well so you can just concentrate on making the image that you envision without having to fiddle. So there is that bit of a uh, learning, or that do a deep dive into your camera for what you need. Like I'm like you, David. I don't know how to focus stack on there. I don't know how to use. I might be able to do what's that called, bracketing for exposure, somewhat like of an HDR thing, but I know, like you said, about 5% of my camera, because all I need to know is about shutter, aperture, or shutter speed, depth of field, aperture, ISO, get my autofocus working great. But this thing could probably launch a rocket if with the amount of technology in there. So, but yeah, learn the basics quite well. Then you can 100% concentrate on the creative side of things. Yeah.
And that'll change the things that you need to, as you get, suddenly you need to use an intervalometer and you're like, I don't know how to do that. Well, you'll figure it out. Everything's figure outable.
Yep, that's right.
And I tell my students, like, if you get a new camera, this is the advantage of not upgrading every damn time, not switching all the time, is you just get so comfortable with that camera that you know where the stuff you really need to know is. And I have told them in the past, like, take that camera out of the box and first you have to know what's important, like the stuff that you need to know, figure that out. And then sit in front while you're watching a movie, just sit there with the camera and go, okay, that's this button. That's this button. If I needed to change, where's my, the thing I access all the time is my exposure compensation. So I photograph in manual. So I set my shutter speed, usually just leave it there, set my aperture, usually just leave it there, although I know when to change it. And then I let my ISO float. So it's sort of it's auto ISO, because I don't care how high it goes. It's never going to go so high I can't deal with it, as long as I expose well. And that's what EV comp is there for. So I assigned a scroll button. And for the most part, when I'm shooting, I always know I'm at 1,000 or higher. Again, I know how to change it when I need to. Sometimes you want to, much slower. It's the only thing I need to do is, like, this is what I do with my, all day long. I press this and I do this, because it's more important for me to know quickly how to get the camera to overexpose by a stop, underexposed by a stop. And I'm constantly looking at the histogram. I haven't metered. Do you remember light meters? Like, I know there are people that still use them and strobes and whatever. But there was a point where, like, metering, and people still, my students say, well, what meter mode do you use? I'm like, I have no friggin' idea. I honestly, because it just doesn't change. Whatever it is, I leave it where it is. I photograph, I look at the histogram, and I don't even do this anymore because you can see it through the.
That's right. Yeah.
And I just look at the histogram and I'm like, I need 2 more stops of light. I need 1 stop less. And it's just, I look at the histogram and I'm constantly EVing up and down. As long as but that's my style of shooting. Everyone's going to have their own thing, as long as you know how to do that with blindfolded, so that when things are really happening, you're not like, oh crap, hang on.
That's exactly it.
Right? And it's like, you're missing the moment. So I just gotta, that stuff should be intuitive to you. And I fear we lose that every time we upgrade or change. And it's like, suddenly, especially, God help you if you're one of those photographers that, shoots with 2 different style of bodies. Like, you got a flagship, like for me, it would be like shooting with an A1 and an A7, whatever, where things are different. It's just like, I need them both to be the same so that I can pick one up, and it's like picking up from the last, so I can shoot with a 600 on one and a 24 to 105 on the other. That, I think, is a disadvantage. I think when we start kind of mixing and matching, and then it's like, I forgot I was on, where's and then the moment's gone.
The best part too the best part, and I think you just touched on this, is you can program any button really to do what you want. So I'm assuming you want the exposure comp at the back on the dial. So you can pre-program that on any of your cameras. I have mine up at the top, but I mean, that's the beauty of these mirrorless cameras. You can set up your cameras all the buttons, especially if they got the rear dial or, whatever it is, so that they all shoot the same and make it comfortable for you. So I've got smaller hands and, using some of the larger camera bodies, that might be a little uncomfortable for me to, use this button here. So I just program this other one, whatever it is.
As long as from one body to the next, they all have the same custom buttons in the same place. And I've noticed that there are, so I have that third body, that A7R4, but I only use it for remotes. It's always on a tripod somewhere and I'm controlling it with my iPad. Sure. I think I'd lose my mind if I was constantly because the layout's different enough that I pick it up. I'm like, where is the, and in the moment you're asking, where is the moment's gone. It's like you pick it up, you're like,
oh, Cheeto's gone. Yeah.
It's gone, right? Or the light's gone, or it's it's.
And if you upgrade your firmware, make sure that if you have custom buttons, make sure you put them back if all of a sudden your firmware erases that, because that's happened the odd time for sure. So.
I tell you what, when I was looking into getting my prosthetic leg, my prosthetist actually introduced the idea of like biomechanics, and there are microchip controlled ankles and stuff. And I said, I swear to God, if I have to charge one more battery or firmware upgrade one, I said, I am not firmware upgrading my foot. Like, I draw the line. And he's like, you have some strong opinions about that. I'm like, don't even get me started on firmware upgrades.
You know what? There, truth be told, like last year, I golfed with somebody that had his leg amputated, and it's all like you just said, biomechanics, Bluetooth. He actually set it to golf mode. So
really?
There's a golf mode, so it locks a certain way. So it positions and locks in a certain way, so he can actually swing the club through. Wow. So he's got
is he an above leg or above knee amputee? Does he have like the mechanical knee?
Above knee, I think it goes right. Yeah, exactly. So it's just the halfway up the thigh, I guess, right? Yeah, or whatever it is.
Those are a level of complicated that I can't even begin to imagine. And fascinatingly enough, the hand stuff is it's space age now. It's all myoelectric, so it's controlled, but you have to learn it. But it's basically controlled. There's sensors on your muscles, and it picks up, and you just we've got, like, you remember the old hook, the hook? Now it's like it's amazing. Like, I've seen videos that just blow my mind.
Wow.
So I mean, the technology it's pretty cool. I think there's a risk of getting lost in it and it being the point. It always drives me crazy, especially, the really geeky photographers. Hey, if that's your thing, knock yourself out. But, the whole, it edge to edge sharpness, it's sharp all the way to the edge and they get bent out of shape. It's not sharp all the way. And I'm like, if people are looking in the corner of your images, like, you're chasing the wrong thing, dude. I actually want the corner of my images to have, I like a little fall off. I like a little softness there. I don't want, what is the obsession with people looking in the corner of your friggin' images?
That's funny.
I will never understand it. So I think there is a balance, when it comes back to the artist and the geek. It's like, I'd like to see the artist kind of get to call the shots and the geeks be the tech support. But that's my own bias.
Hey everyone, our Wonders of Waterton Nature Photography and Video Workshop is happening June 5th to 8th.
Don't miss this chance to learn and create in one of Canada's most beautiful parks. Spots are limited. Register now at thenaturephotoguys.ca. I got to ask you, I mean, it sounds like you have had an amazing career. You have an amazing career, but I'm going to ask you, like, is there one, like, story or one crazy thing that happened to you that you just have to share? Like, I mean, I'm sure you've had hundreds, but is there something that really stands out that's just going to get everybody going here? Like, is there, I'm sure you've got, like I said, a ton of stories
from the photography world or for the comedy world or from where we're going?
No, just more on the photography side, I think, because you've traveled how many countries? I mean, it was,
I think I'm just getting up to my 60th country. This year.
Something crazy must have happened that,
I've had lots of crazy stuff. I mean, the number of times that I've had to bribe my way out of countries.
No, really?
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, it's It's been a fun ride. It really has. And I've had some incredible moments. I think one of the things that most took me by surprise is I was doing my humanitarian stuff with an organization called the BOMA Project, and they were up in northern Kenya. And like, this is before the roads went in. A lot has happened in the last 15, 20 years. But I was working with this organization, and they were working with the Rendille people, which are a little bit like Samburu, which are a little bit like Maasai, heavily beaded, red plaid, what you imagine with Kenyan tribes. And so we were way up. So I didn't even know where. Well beyond, they had rarely seen white folks. And so I was in this little hut with a bunch of women and my interpreter, Kura, and the women were just like, and I'd been photographing for a few hours in the village, and my presence was known, and the women were just chatter, but the chatter got more and more kind of disagreeable. And finally I said, Kura, what's going on? He goes, they're arguing about your name. And I said, well, we could just tell them my name. He goes, not your English name, your Rendille name. I said, well, I don't have a Rendille name. He goes, like I'm the idiot. He's like, that's what they're arguing about. And this one woman who she just died this last year. She took it upon herself to adopt me, and she was insisting that they choose a name for me. All of this happening without my awareness. I'm like, do I get a say? Anyway, they adopted me. They gave me the name Akeno, which means he who brings good, bringer of good.
Oh, wow.
And for years, I would be up in that area, and people would be like, they're a little bit, sort of suspicious, as they should be, of outsiders. And then Kura would be like, well, this is Akeno. Oh, Akeno. Oh, well, we've heard of Akeno. Come on in. Basically keys to the city kind of thing.
Yeah.
All kinds of crazy stuff. And when I had my accident in Italy, I ended up back in Ottawa. I was in the hospital for 40 days. And during that time, my village, this village in northern Kenya, people that probably couldn't read the written word on a page, but they'd heard that through my friend Kura that I'd been injured. They gathered, we're talking the other side of the planet. The elders gathered the village together under the acacia tree and did an entire day of prayers, drumming and dancing and praying for Akeno. And sent me via my friend Kura, sent me a rungu, which it's a stick with kind of a ball on the end. It's basically kind of a war club. It's a weapon. And they sent it to me. I'm lying in my hospital bed, and I get this package from Kenya, from my village. And it was just, they sent it, and Kura told me this story, and they sent it sort of as kind of as a symbol to say, keep fighting. And I went back. Once I was finally able to, I went back, and I, kind of returning son, and it was a big deal. And I said, well, let's do it right. And so I said, should I bring I'd like to bring something. And Kura's like, well, there's a lot of people. And it started as I want to buy a goat. In the end, I had to buy 3 bags of rice, kilograms of butter, a camel. And we had this massive barbecue, on these big pits, and we had dancing, and the elders all gathered around me and prayed for me. And it was this, and the reason it so impacted me is because I am deeply introverted. When I think about back to that kid that was 14 years old, picking up a camera, when I was getting a little more serious when I was 16, I remember cutting a cover off of several covers off of National Geographic, one of which was Steve McCurry's portrait of Sharbat Gula, the Afghan girl. I was so impacted by the power of those photographs. I was like, that's the kind of, but I never imagined, that I would do the things that I've done. It's as much as I crap talk my cameras, they have taken me around the world to some unbelievable, I've been face to face with incredible animals. I was lying on the ground in Kenya with a tusker named Craig, terrible name for an elephant, but he's one of the biggest tuskers still alive, huge, massive ivory tusks. I don't know why I specified ivory. They're all made of ivory, but big, massive, and this massive elephant. And I'm lying on the ground, and I could almost, he's so big and so close that like my 24 millimeter, I still, even if I'd had 16 millimeters, I wouldn't have got the whole animal in it. He's so close, and he's walking right by me and just, swinging. And I don't mean to put a picture into your head, but for whatever reason, he gets very aroused by these kind of encounters.
Oh, jeez.
And his penis is always out, and it's like practically dragging on the ground. I'm worried I'm going to get hit in the face with this gigantic elephant penis. And he's walking by, and it's just, it's this moment of awe and wonder. And I'm like, how did this happen to me? There have been just too many, and I think if you allow the camera to be the point of this whole thing, you maybe miss out on some of it. But you got to give the camera credit where it's due. It has opened my eyes to experiences I never would have had, encounters that I never would have had. Which is pretty significant for a kid that, got bullied a lot in school and believed he was just a stupid kid, and very introverted, and to be doing the things I'm doing. I just feel so lucky. I feel so lucky to be doing it. And, if the price of that is getting smacked in the face with an elephant penis once in a while, I think, you take your licks where you have to.
To be a behind the scenes camera photographer on that one. So.
Exactly. Where's my GoPro when I need it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
To be introverted, though, that surprises me. I mean, there are introvert extroverts, but in the sense that I'm guessing you're introverted in the sense that you just, once you've done these big adventures, you just need that time to recharge outside of the grandeur of what just happened. I guess, is that your introverted kind of self?
Yeah, and I mean, particularly with people, like I get peopled out very quickly.
Okay.
I can turn it on. Like I mean, as a comedian, I think you learn to play, I learned to play an extrovert on TV, like basically you take a deep breath before you go on stage, and you put a big grin on your face and you play a character. But it's exhausting. And I still, to some degree, I wouldn't say I play a character, but when I'm with groups of people, when I'm speaking or with students, I have to kind of come out of myself, and I find it exhausting. A really good kind of exhausting. Like I wouldn't trade it. But for every day that I do stuff like that, I need like 3 or 4 days to recharge. Whereas I would define an extrovert, and it's all on a bit of a spectrum, right? I mean, I don't think anyone's one or the other. We're sort of but I'm pretty far along towards introversion for sure. But I have, I still like being with people. I get peopled out really quick. So I look at introversion and extroversion as, where do you find your energy, and
correct,
where do you go to recharge? And some people go to other people to recharge, and I go like I want to be with my wife in front of the fire with an old fashioned, and and that's good for, or sitting alone reading a book for hours.
Yeah,
and I was very shy, and I don't think being shy is the same as extroversion or introversion, but I was also very shy. I remember doing public speaking things, through school when we had to do a presentation. I remember doing one in high school. So right before kind of something clicked and I stopped being like this, but I remember having to put a visual aid on the blackboard, and I couldn't put it on the My hands were shaking so badly, I couldn't even get this damn thing on the blackboard. And it wasn't until sort of my last year of high school, and I'm not 100% sure what happened, but suddenly I really liked doing public speaking. Maybe I was more confident. I stopped, people stopped beating me up around grade 12, which was nice. So something kind of changed, but I was still very shy, and I was still very like, give me, if I have a choice between hanging out with a bunch of people for an evening or being by myself, I'm like, I think I feel a cold coming on. I just want to read my book.
Yeah.
So did the magic and the comedy come from at that switch when you were in grade 12, or did it come back later?
No, it came a little bit later when I was in college. I had a friend who juggled, and I was like, I could either study for my next exams or I could learn to juggle. And I was like, I'm not stupid. I'm going to learn how to juggle. So, and he was a really good teacher, and he taught me. And within one evening, I was juggling like whatever I could find, not very well. By the end of the week, I was doing like flaming torches and machetes, and I was like, I found my thing. I'm going to be a juggler. Wow. And it gave me, but here's where it relates to that whole introversion, extroversion thing. It gave me a thing to hide behind, right? Sure. It gave me instead of like talking about myself, I was like, hey, and I spent years doing, magic tricks and juggling and increasingly enjoying it. And so that's where the two careers tie is. I think all of the things I learned in terms of communication carried over into what I do now, especially in the humanitarian stuff, where I was working still with a lot of kids and families.
Sure.
It was a good skill set to have, I remember being in Rwanda and stupidly, the first experience was there was a bunch of kids and they were gathering. And so I reached down to grab 3 rocks to juggle. And the minute my hand touched that first rock, every kid in the village was gone. And I was like, oh, okay, we've had some experience with someone throwing rocks. And so I stood there in the middle of the street juggling these 3 rocks, and slowly they came out. That's what I am. But then I reached into my pocket and I grabbed a coin, and the kids were like, oh, and I just did a simple, vanish. I made the coin disappear and pulled it out from a kid's nose. And the look on these kids' faces, I thought it was wonder and awe. No, it was sheer terror, like the witch doctor had come out and done this thing. Oh my goodness. And I was like, I'm high in the mountains in this village in Rwanda, and I'm like, I think I've made a terrible, terrible error. But for the most part, it all went well. I never got run out of a village. And most of the time it broke the ice and the kids laughed, and, I loved that. So all those skills kind of came into play. They nearly got me into trouble a couple times.
Did the rubber chicken guy ever have to show up in Rwanda?
Oh, you did do your research.
We found some video, David.
What's that?
We found some videos.
So for those listening that are not on the inside here, to my shame. So I did 12 years of comedy, but my stage name was the Rubber Chicken Guy. And I don't regret any of that. I'm so glad I'm not 53 years old being the Rubber Chicken Guy. I don't tell you. There's a certain point at which, like just the illusion of having some dignity is important. But it was a wonderful part of my life. I really enjoyed it. But yeah, every now and then someone sends me even an email. Aren't you the Rubber Chicken Guy? I'm like, I can't escape this thing that I've created, this monster. But yeah, I did do a DVD. And please, for the love of God, don't waste your money on it. A DVD. Yeah, I'm not going to go any further than that than to suggest that it may or may not still be available on Amazon. I don't get a penny from it. I gave that up a long time ago to the friend that produced it, and so I'm sure he's not making much on it. Honestly, every now and then a friend will be stupid and they won't listen to me. They'll go and order it, and they'll come up afterwards, and I always know they've watched it because they have this look on their face like, what the hell was that? And I'm like, I told you, different guy. Like I warned you. It kind of fits into that. Well, I'm never getting that 2 hours of my life back. But people say that. But has anyone ever got that 2 hours of their life back? Even if it's the best thing you've ever done, you're not getting it back.
That's
true.
So,
that's true.
Cautionary tale: just stay away. Wow. Just don't run to Amazon right now, because I won't benefit, and it will do nothing but reduce your estimation of me, your respect for me. You'll be like, the hell was that?
It made us smile today. It was great.
Thank you for bringing that up. I'm going to have nightmares tonight.
Do you have a book in the works, like like the misadventures or your life experiences, and like with photography, that was just one short little story you gave us. You must have hundreds. Is there an idea, or has that always been in the back of your mind? Maybe
I don't know. Every now and then, yeah. Every once in a while, I think about it, and then I sit in front of a computer. I'm like, I can't remember any of this stuff. I actually need to just go through all my old podcasts when people poke at something, and I'm like, that reminds me, because I sort of forget these things,
Sure.
But there have been some wonderful experiences. I'm too young for that. I think memoirs are the stuff of, old people that are looking back. I'm still making my memories. I'm not ready for the box set just yet.
Well, we'll
So,
have you down for 20 years from this day, and we'll review. We'll see how that book's coming along. Maybe by then, at 73, you'll be ready for it, right? So
there's something to it for there's something to it for sure. My hope is that that I live a good enough story that it's entertaining.
Oh, sure.
And my other hope is that, and my mother's hope, I think, is that living that good story doesn't get me killed prematurely, but. I offer no promises. We'll see. Like I said, that didn't go as planned. It's become something of a motto in my life. But I don't know. None of us make it. I had a girlfriend once that said, she goes, "You worry about so much," and she said, "You're not making it out of this alive, right?" And I'm like, it's such an obvious thought, but I was like, "Yeah, you're right. Like, I'm not getting my damage deposit back at this point. Like, I've really screwed myself. Where's the leg?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Well, so okay, what would you?
That's a tough segue, isn't it? I can't wait to see how you're climbing out of this one.
Well, based on your life experiences, the career you've had now, what would you say, or what kind of advice would you give aspiring nature, humanitarian, whatever genre of photography they're starting in? Like, what's kind of a life lesson, or what kind of advice would you give somebody that now, that old cliche thing, what now you wish you would have known then, that kind of stuff. Is there something you'd like to share?
There's lots of things. There's lots of things. I would say, first of all, get over the gear as fast as you can. Like, learn to use it, but then figure out why you are in this. And if it's storytelling, get really good at storytelling. Don't ask photographers about storytelling. Most of them know nothing about story. Go read books on actual storytelling. If you want to get into this for like a business, read books on business, read books on marketing. I have a camera is no longer a marketing plan. Have camera will travel is only slightly worse. Everyone's got a camera. Everyone wants to travel. You need to have value to offer to the world. Again, it doesn't have to be for like a vocation or an occupation. You still need to figure out what you are all about, what value you bring to the world. That may just be a certain kind of, a response to your photographs. You find out that what you really love is fine art and you want to do fine art. You don't want to do journalism. That's a step in the right direction. Second thing I would say is it's all about the people that you meet. This whole idea, it's not what you know, it's who you know, is absolutely true. And I couldn't have made it where I have made it without in many cases, unexpected connections, but it's all about connections. And the more willing you are to, people call and say, or email and they say, how do I get into humanitarian photography? I'm like, you get to know a bunch of humanitarians, like figure out their needs, the organizations. If you wanted to do paying work in conservation, figure out like who needs stories told, get to know them, get to know like what their problems are as a conservation organization and figure out how to solve them for them. But it's all about people and don't burn any bridges. I have some bridges that I've burned that at the time I felt very justified in. And now I kind of go, that was a little short-sighted. I think I'm only becoming a more graceful person as I get older. I would have responded differently. So just realize the value of those connections. And then the other thing that I was saying, this applies to everyone, is take more risks. And I'm aware of the irony of someone who lost his leg saying this, but maybe I'm the most qualified to. You will survive everything until that final thing that you don't survive. Everything else, you're going to make it through. And as Nietzsche said, what doesn't kill us only gives us something to blog about, and you can leverage that shit. So, take risks.
Awesome.
Take risks with your creativity. Take risks with, yes, be smart. Like take risks. Maybe don't take risks financially. Like, that money lens that you're going to put on your credit card, don't do it. It's not a money lens. You're still going to make the same boring, crappy photographs. They're just going to have a little less bokeh. That's okay. It's better to have $8,000 in the bank and be able to spend that on a trip somewhere. Better go on a trip and make some photographs, have some experiences, learn some lessons, than to be stuck at home because you bought all this gear that you can never use. People are really stupid with money, and I've been there. I went bankrupt when I was 30 because I was stupid with money. Don't take risks with that stuff. Be smart, invest in yourself, save, pay your taxes, et cetera, et cetera. But with other stuff, the stuff that, like with your art, take so many risks, try everything, because in the world of art, nobody gets rewarded for being the same. The world is looking for voices that are distinctly their own. When I say things like, when I talk about Prince or, Vincent van Gogh or any name of any artist in any field that has any renown, Andy Warhol or Jackson Pollock, things immediately spring to your mind. Prince wearing his purple stuff and being the artist formerly known as, and they didn't blend in. They stood out, and to do that, they took a risk that in doing that, it might have been a flop. Take as many risks as possible. Playing it safe gets you absolutely nowhere. It just gets you safe photographs, and the world has no appetite for safe photographs. So, yeah, take those risks. Again, don't write to me later and send me a lawsuit or something. You're still responsible for your own decisions.
We'll put that disclaimer at the end of the podcast.
The laws of gravity still apply to you, even though I suggested you go and take some chances.
Yeah.
By making your art, you're not going to die because someone didn't like the photograph that you shared, and they're like, that's stupid. The haters are always going to hate. Take some risks. Because I know this. The risk may not, just like with my leg, the choice you made, the gamble, it may not pay off, but we do know what happens when we play it safe. The safer you are, I don't know, is that the story you want to live? Is that the art you want to make? Like, I guess we all have things that matter to us, and some people want to be safe, and that's fine. But I don't know a lot of people that are picking up cameras and making art that are like, yeah, I want to make safe pictures. And to do that, like, safe pictures are made by safe photographers. Boring pictures are made by boring photographers, and bored photographers, right? So take some risks. I think that would be the big one. Like, where I'm so fixed on the now, like, what if I fail? You'll learn. You'll either succeed or you will learn. Like, those are the two options. Not I will succeed or fail. You will either succeed or you will learn. And if you learn, you increase your chances of succeeding. Will it hurt? Yeah, it sometimes really hurts, either actually physically or internally. But there is a difference between hurt. I can feel myself going off on a sermon, so I'll keep it short. There's a difference between hurt and harm. When I go to my physiotherapist, when I go to my massage therapist, and they're digging around, adhesions and scar tissue, it hurts like, I've never wanted to punch someone so bad in all my life than when my beautiful, wonderful young physiotherapist or massage therapist gets in there but it's not harm. It hurts an awful lot, but it doesn't harm. And this has come very clear to me with phantom pain, because I mean, some of the pain you experience when the thing your brain thinks should be there isn't there. It's like my brain's making angry phone calls to my foot going, where are you? And it's not answering. And so the voicemail messages are getting more angry. And like, it can be horrific. If the kind of pain I feel in my right foot, I don't have a right foot anymore, but my brain still thinks I do. If that kind of pain was happening on my left foot, which I would be at the hospital so fast going, something is incredibly wrong. But it's not really all, quote, all in my head, but the pain is very real, but it doesn't harm me. And neither will the pain you experience from taking a risk creatively and putting your art out there and it not getting the reception you want. It will hurt. You will learn, but it will not harm you. And what will harm us is staying safe. We know that, staying on the couch and never taking a chance, unless that's just really what you're into, it's a life of sitting on the couch. And where there's risk, there is the chance of reward. Where there's no risk, there's very little chance of reward. So that was a long answer to your question, but this stuff matters.
No,
like how
that's
you
amazing
choose to live
advice.
your life now in the moment is how you will live your life always. Like we always get these little do-overs, but increasingly they're in the rear view mirror. Like, oh, I shoulda. Don't let your life be one of I shouldas. Grab it, and try. At least then you tried. And like I said, you haven't failed. If it doesn't go to plan, you've learned something, and that takes you to extraordinary places. The person you will become that will make the art that person will one day make, it will be astonishing.
Wow. I mean, absolutely.
That's amazing. Wow.
I don't even know what to say about that.
Yeah.
And for those listening, I just hope they take your advice, because I mean, I wish I would have known this 20 some years ago. But you played safe. Married, family, kids. You know what I mean? There's a certain time in your life where you play the safe game. You go to work, you're providing, and that kind of stuff. But when you get to a certain point, like you said, I don't know. It's there's a time, I think, where everybody there's that opportune time where is it time to go? Like, are you going to be left behind? Are you going to, I think you've just given a lot of people, a lot of listeners, something to really think about. And I'm certainly thinking about it. Absolutely.
Well, and life's too short. You only live once, so embrace it.
That's what I understand. And your risk will be different than my risk. I'm not saying like risk everything. I'm not saying, leave your family, but I have friends that are quite risk averse, and one in particular that I'm thinking of. And I always, when we get talking about this stuff, I keep thinking like how you deal with risk is going to be, and I don't have kids, so it's easy to be an armchair parent, but I'm like, your kids they're picking up on how you handle risk, and they will either learn how to deal with apparent failure, or they will learn from you how to be risk averse. And I think that's one of my worries. Like, one of the greatest things that we can be is resilient, and kids that don't learn resilience, that don't learn to take chances and live their dream, where are they going to get that skill set from when they're thrust out into the world? Like, again, the risks that you will take as a husband and a father will be different than the ones that I take only as a husband and not a father. They'll be different. But I think we need to take those, even, not just to live a good life, but so that our kids never feel, or the people around us never feel like, on their behalf, we never lived our dreams. Like, wow, that would be a horrible thing to deal with. So anyway, I guess I felt like I needed to just add that one little bit, that your risk, what's risky for you will not be what's risky for me, and vice versa. Because I do think
it's different for everybody.
The math is different for all of us, and you've got to do your own math and figure it out. But just to go, it's too much risk. So, well, is it? Is it really, or is it just a little uncomfortable? Is it little like, there's cutting your leg off risk, and then there's sharing that picture you're not really sure about on Instagram risk.
Absolutely.
And it may feel scarier for you to put your stuff on Insta, or to put it out in the world, or to call that person about an exhibit, or send in a book, whatever, a book proposal. That may actually feel scarier to you than me going, this is just something I need to do. And because I have a lifetime of I joke about, well, that didn't go as planned, but look, I'm still here. Like, every risk I've taken has paid off.
You
not the way I thought most of the time. But here I am. So
absolutely.
Anyway.
Well, David, before we wrap up, I want to say, for one, thank you for sending Chris and I our signed copies of your book.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
It's the book's stunning. Like Chris, I didn't get through all of it, but I can't wait to get back to it. And also want to say to our listeners that David also sent us a copy that we're going to use as a giveaway. So thank you so much for that, David. And
you're very welcome.
We're going to be running that in the next little bit. I guess it depends on when people hear the podcast, but within the next few weeks of this airing, we're going to have it. We're going to run it on our social medias. So one lucky listener out there is going to get a copy of David's book. So again, David, I just want to say thank you so much for that.
And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful book. So.
Thank you. Absolutely. And we're going to wrap things up here, David. I know we've taken a bunch of your time, but so much appreciated. I mean, I learned so much. I'm leaving this podcast inspired, like Fantastic. You have no idea.
Absolutely.
So
appreciate you being on.
Thank you so much for that. So
yeah, you're welcome. And let's do a rematch at some point. The next time you're sitting around going, how else are we going to bore people for 2 hours? Call me up. I'm really happy to do it. It's I can talk forever.
It'll be before 73. I mean, I did say 20 years from now, but I'm sure we can cut that time in at least half. Yeah,
I may be even less coherent by the time I'm that old. So there's kind of a limited time offer here. Get me in the next 10 years before dementia takes over.
There you go. Hopefully we'll see you in the field one day too. So
I'd like that. I'd like that for sure. All right, gentlemen. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thanks, David.
Let's do it again.
All right.
Okay.
You betcha. Thank you.
Care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye now. Before we wrap up, we'd like to thank the Camera Store for supporting the Nature Photo Guys podcast.
They're a legendary name in photography, and their support helps us keep bringing you these episodes.
Don't forget to check them out at thecamerastore.com for all your photography and video needs.
Thanks for joining us on the Nature Photo Guys podcast. If you have any questions, contact us at info@thenaturePhotoGuys.ca or message us on Facebook and Instagram at the Nature Photo Guys Podcast. Visit YouTube and subscribe to our channel to watch all our latest videos. Or follow and listen to our latest podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on our website at thenaturePhotoGuys.ca. We'll catch you next time on the Nature Photo Guys Podcast.